Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Indra in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 21, The Boy Who Leapt Through Space and Time. Namikaze Minato opened his eyes to the world of the living for the first time in 13 years. For him, it had only been an instant. It was strange, knowing the real him was dead, his soul trapped in the Shinigami's belly. Nothing he could do about it now, not using his son's body. The Nine Tails had left enough of its chakra before his soul had departed for the statue for Minato to use what little he had left to do this. Nobody was in the room with him. They had likely just left him here, intent on picking him later. Sloppy of them, but he assumed that they didn't bother doing the cleanup themselves. Somebody else would come for him. He didn't intend to wait. He closed his eyes, and focused on sensing chakra. It was strange how different the ability felt in his son's untrained body. Muted, somehow. There were around a dozen strong chakra signatures in the floors around him. S rank, all of them. He was likely in a tower. Somebody had taken Naruto's equipment when he had arrived. What Minato was interested in was the Fuinjutsu scroll Kakashi had given to Naruto just 1 month ago. He had felt a very familiar chakra signature, and after quizzing his son, had figured why. This had been his own scroll. And he had stamped a hydration tag on it, long ago. He breathed in, and out. Somebody was coming in his general direction. There was no time to waste. There. He felt the scroll's position. Now, for the trickier part. Remember this feeling, Naruto? He thought. I'm watching. His son answered. Wherever the tag was. That was where he currently was. Not where his body was. The universe could catch up. He pulsed his chakra once, telling the world the way it was going to be. He appeared in a flash in a study room. The man with long hair in a ponytail, who had brought him here, turned around as quickly as you'd expect from an S-rank ninja. There was one thing, though. Minato was faster. His hand was already on the man's head before he could reach for his chakra. The rays non-formed inside his skull, turning its insides to mush silently. The man died, just like this. Sujin's face was frozen in a terrible rictus, blood pouring from his ears and nose. Minato flew through a few hand seals, and stored the body in a nearby notepad. Naruto could likely use the bounty. He packed everything he could find in the room, heedless of who it belonged to. Dead men had no use for research notes. He quickly drafted a seal on the back of his hand, storing everything in it. Not the best practice, but better than risking losing it. The room he was in was connected to a main room where 3 other ninja were currently sitting. Any other day, he would feel confident enough to face them. Not today. He didn't know how much time he had left. He summoned a blade of wind to his hand and cut through the heavy window directly. He set it on the floor silently, and twisted his body so that he could crawl through. Icy rain hit his face. He saw clouds. Just how high were they? Something was strange with the rain. Chakra. It was saturated in chakra. Meaning that somebody had probably noticed there was an intruder in the tower. The door slammed open. A man released a burst of searing flame toward him. I have no time left. Fighting is not an option here. He jumped through the window. He located his closest hydration tag. That was a long jump, but he could make. He lost control over Naruto's body. Back into the mindscape, where outside time stood still, Naruto cursed. My time is over, Naruto. Yeah. I noticed. What the fuck do I do? Language. Naruto laughed at the absurdity of it. You just jumped out of a building so high I can't even see ground level. Who cares about profanity? Minato looked sheepish. I'm sorry. You're going to have to use the hydration. Do I look like I know how to? Well. No, but you saw me do it. Try to reproduce it. That's all the advice you could come up with. It's a pretty simple jutsu. Not easy, but simple. The tag helps you chakra sensing ability through it over longer distances than usual, and the rest is just convincing yourself that's where you are, using your chakra. Oh. Just that. Naruto snarked. Yes, exactly. Minato nodded, glad his son saw it was not all that bad. What happens if I mess it up? Don't think about this now. Damn it. Minato started fading. Naruto. I think it's time for me. Yeah. I see that. He was not looking at him, unsure of how to feel about the man. There are some scrolls in my old safe house I want you to find. You will find it, once you master your sensor ability. They will help you, I'm sure. I will do that. Whatever you decide to do from now on is up to you. Whether you choose to go back to Konoha or not, Naruto stiffened. Minato smiled. I would understand, considering the circumstances. I'm proud of you. Naruto didn't trust his voice. If you manage to do something about the Shinigami seal, maybe we will be able to speak again. Be careful with your promise to the Ninetail, don't break it. Take care of yourself. I will. Eat, and grow strong. Survive. Please. Naruto nodded stiffly. Minato continued. And for what it's worth. I'm sorry. Yeah, I get that. Me too. That we'd meet like this. Naruto's shoulders shook. Minato disappeared with a sad smile. The last thing the Nine Tails had done before fading into the strange statue was leave Naruto its remaining power, which was almost 2 tails. The fourth, his dad, then had locked it behind a modified version of the seal he apparently had carried his whole life. He should be able to access the beast's chakra, now. But it would likely be better if he didn't, because if he ever exhausted the reserve, he would die. He did not know if this counted as breaking his promise to the Ninetails, but he was not going to try to find out. Even now, with the creature gone, he could feel its consciousness somewhere far away. Maybe he could even reach for it, if he tried. There were tons of different thoughts running through his mind. He chose to push them aside for now, remembering everything he knew about the Hyratian. He spent what felt like an hour inside his mindscape, unsure if he would even be able to come back here again. Once he felt ready, or rather as ready as he could ever be, he focused on his exterior awareness. Falling from this high was a strange sensation. Past the first few seconds, the sensation of being pulled to the ground faded away. After this, it was very quiet. He went through a cloud, real or artificial, he didn't know. Naruto focused on the sense he had felt Minato stretch before. The sort of awareness that always warned him when a ninja, or any creature with strong chakra, was somewhere around. Most shinobi had some ability to feel others, whether they called it a danger sense or something else. He breathed out, and his breath misted. He could see the ground, now. He closed his eyes, this would not help him, at all. Feeling for a tag. Wait, how did this work? Where would all the velocity he had accumulated go? Would he just kill himself on arrival? No. Not the time. Where was this tag? He couldn't feel any sign of a tag. His sensor ability was simply not developed enough. Maybe the fourth. Maybe his dad would have managed. But he couldn't. He quickly decided to do things differently. He focused on the sensation of teleportation, instead. Naruto couldn't locate any specific tags. That was one thing. He would just go to a tag. Any would do. This might be a stupid decision, but he had nothing better. Wherever the tag was. That was where he currently was. Not where his body was. The universe was just a bit late. He pulsed his chakra once, telling the world the way it was going to be. He vanished. His pursuer, a missing nin from Waterfall, named Kakuzu, cursed when the boy disappeared. Nagato had likely felt it too. What had happened? And where was the boy? Sasuke and Toru reached the village gates more than 5 days after they had departed. Sasuke's arm had entirely healed, courtesy of the tailed beast he was now hosting. Some of its chakra was leaking through his own, and some people blanched when they felt it. He and Toru went straight for the tower. The last message the Hokage had received had been from Suna itself, confirming the completion of the aquifer. So when his son came into his office, clothes in tatters, and distinctly non-human chakra pouring out of him, followed by his cousin, who only had one eye open. To say he was surprised would be an understatement. He called for Jiraiya to be recalled immediately. Then sent for Shisui and the third. Itake was out of the village, at the moment. The report could wait. Their teammate was gone, too. Fugaku cursed when his son revealed that his eyes had changed. He had thought Toru dead. And then Naruto had gotten kidnapped to an unknown place. They said he would die in the next 2 days. The third said nothing. When was this? He struggled to get out. 5 days ago. The third closed his eyes, in visible pain. Hokage-sama, if you will excuse me. I will come back in an hour. The seal will hold, I can promise you this much. Jiraiya will arrive in a few days. Fugaku nodded. He knew the man had been close to his grandnephew. The third excused himself from the room, hiding his eyes. So it worked? Shisui asked, tone dead serious. The jutsu you told me about. Toru asked, voice dead. Yes, it did. And as you told me, it took my eye. Shisui nodded. Toru continued. I couldn't do anything about Naruto, though. When I came back to myself, he was already gone, and Sasuke was, he sniffled. Shisui grabbed him in a hug. I'm glad you lived. He hugged his older brother. The eyes that you now possess are called Mangekyou non. They awaken by suffering trauma. They will grant you powerful abilities, but it comes with a price. Over time, your vision will deteriorate. Why did I never hear of it? The price to activate it is very high. Only a few people awakened it. And how do you know about this? Sasuke had a suspicion. Fugaku closed his eyes. I had a dear friend, once. He opened his eyes, and his Sharingan swirled into a form Sasuke had never seen before. Sasuke said nothing. I'm not the only one. Itake and Shisui have awakened it too. We will help you to learn how to control its power. So that if you ever need it, he left the sentence unfinished. Thank you. Fugaku sighed, looking weary. I wish I could have done more, Sasuke. He ruffled Sasuke's hair, who tried hard not to cry again. The third wept openly, once he was alone. He had made a terrible mistake. Once more. And he would need to tell a few things to Fugaku. Ino had asked Toru, who was now wearing a black eye patch over his right eye, having refused to take Shisui's eye, as the village and the clan needed him more, where Naruto was. Is he hiding from me again? Ino made it a point not to ask him about what happened to his eye. Toru paled, and let out a long sigh. Ino. Ino knelt down. She couldn't speak. Toru embraced her. The pain in her heart was too much for her. She let the tears flow. He had seemed larger than life, the kind of person who'd end up there with Konoha's heroes, despite his reluctance. And now, she was supposed to believe he was dead, before even becoming an adult? Before she could even muster the courage to tell him how she felt? She let out a heart-wrenching scream. When he told her, Sakura thanked him for telling her, shakily, and then ran back inside. Toru sighed. Sasuke had enough on his plate, what with the Biju within him, and his new eyes. So he had taken it upon himself to tell Naruto's closest friends about his demise. Kono Amaru took it hard, by Wako with the quiet dignity of someone who had already lost too many. He had thought this would be the worst of it. But Ino and Sakura were his friends, too. Seeing Ino looking so lost, and Sakura so quiet, felt like someone was rubbing salt in his own wound. And now he would have to find a way to get in touch with Karen, too. Jiraiya arrived without his usual fanfare one day after that. He took a look at the seal and cursed. This really is Suna's work, isn't it? Naruto copied it off the last Jinchuriki they had, yes. He said it was shoddy. Jiraiya barked a laugh. Shoddy at best. It's like they wanted to make it shitty. I know they have a few alright seal masters. Sasuke said nothing. Jiraiya stared at him, very seriously. Kid, how much do you hear the demon's voice? It has never stopped since we sealed it. What does it say? It has tried almost anything, really. It's always looking for an angle. Anything. Anything. My fears, my hopes. My weaknesses. Jiraiya frowned. Well, that's not good. I can't remake the seal entirely. but I can definitely make it better. I would appreciate it. Sasuke paused. Will it prevent me from using the demon's power? Jiraiya stared. It might interfere, yes. Then I can't agree. Kid, you can't be serious. We will need its strength. He stared at Jiraiya. What is Suna saying? The Toad Sage winced. They're angry, to say the least. They know just how unstable Gaara was, which is the only reason they're not up in arms. Yet, even then, they accused us of poaching their beast. That's what I thought. We might need its strength, then. Jiraiya sighed. We might. And I won't allow something like this to happen to anyone else. I need to become stronger, much stronger. You can't save everyone, kid. He said, bitterly. Believe me, I tried. I'm not pretending I can. Sasuke's stare was intense. But I will do my best. Jiraiya smiled. He had heard similar words from another young prodigy he had trained. Are you sure? I will train with my clan, to learn how to use my eyes. I should be able to control the beast, then. And what of before that? It could take you a while. Look. Here's what we can do. I'll tighten the seal temporarily, as well as improve what I can for good. Once you learn whatever Sharingan trick helps you control it, I'll open it again. Sounds good. Sasuke bowed. This is more than I could ask for. I humbly thank you, Jiraiya-sama. He laughed. Ah, come on, don't be so formal. Call me sensei, instead. As soon as you get your fancy eyes under control, we're leaving the village for a training trip. Pack 4. Let's say a few years. Sasuke stumbled. What? He snorted. Can't let you learn how to control a tailed beast on your own, now. Can I? Guess not. He got his sealing supplies out. As of now, you're the legendary Jiraiya's esteemed pupil. Now, let's work on your seal, Sasuke. Fugaku was in the Hokage's office, where he was spending more and more time. There was trouble. Suna had tried to force him to send them his son, wanting to get back the power of their tailed beast, as well as the Sharingan. He had refused, of course. He would never hand over his own family. The relation between the two villages had gone cold, even if war wasn't necessarily on the horizon. At least for now. Namikaze Minato's son had survived his birth, only to die 13 years later. That would at least explain Sasuke's teammates' seemingly natural talent in a few fields. And just like the Uchiha, there had never been a Sarutobi without at least a passing fire affinity, before. Knowing he had been made the host of the Nine Tails, though. That was something else. What the hell had Sarutobi been thinking? Raising the boy in his clan, he could at least somewhat understand. But hiding the truth about the village's Jinchuriki to everyone, including the Hokage? If that was him trying to protect Naruto. He was going about it in a very twisted way. And now they had lost both Namikaze's son and the power of the Nine Tails. He cursed the third. Fugaku got back to work. There was a lot he would have to do in the coming years. Naruto appeared in a yellow flash in a small fishing harbor, the sudden bright light of the day blinding him. When he had vanished from the Nation of Rain, and he was pretty sure that's where he had been, it had been the middle of the night. He had a sick feeling in the bottom of his stomach. Flying Thunder God is a space-time ninjutsu. That's what his father had explained to him, just a few minutes ago. Most people overlooked the time factor. Naruto didn't. Not today. Not when the sun was shining so bright and hot. The desert was one thing. But it simply wasn't supposed to be this warm near the sea at this time of the year. Something was wrong. Really wrong. How much time has it been? He was scared of the answer. Chapter 22, No Place to Call Home. The first thing Naruto did. Well, no. The first thing he did was hole himself up in a seaside inn, and sleep until the next morning. That was the only way he could process the last few days. Toru was dead. He somehow couldn't wrap his head around this sentence. Toru was dead. How many times had he rolled his eyes, complained about the younger Uchiha? Too many to count. The stupid jokes, the endless nagging and prodding. The easy friendship, the unwavering loyalty. He was crying for his friend. Sasuke was likely alive, but his closest friend had been killed in front of him, and there was a tailed beast inside him, now. He had killed someone. It had been very deliberate, too. He had felt he had no other choice, at the time. But was it true? He wasn't so sure. That was how he fell asleep. Once more, he had been too weak. Now, he was also a murderer. Naruto slipped out at the first crack of dawn. He bought a newspaper that he kept carefully folded. He ate something light for breakfast, then sat down on a ridge overlooking the sea. The sea was tumultuous today, he noted absent-mindedly. There, with trembling hands, he opened the paper, looking for the date. 3 years, and some. He had somehow managed to jump more than 3 years in the future. That's the present now. He corrected himself, hysterically. He felt himself panic. 3 fucking years. That meant he had been born 16 years ago, even though he was only 13. Toru. No, Toru was dead. Sasuke, Ino, Sakura. Karin, too. They were 16 and something, now? Holy shit, Konohamaru was almost his age. Then something scarier occurred to him. Is everyone even still alive? 3 years was a lot of time. In just 1 year, several of his classmates had died already. And that had been when they were just regular genin. Naruto stared at the sea, unsure of how to proceed. He tried to catch up on the world's events. Relationships between Leaf and Sand were tense. Hidden Mist and Cloud had territorial skirmishes going on, particularly on Red Island, fighting for its territory. It hadn't erupted in a full war, but the seeds were there. Stone had a tentative alliance going on with Mist, so if it came to that, the elemental nations would likely tear themselves apart, once more. He informed himself of the major villages' leaders. Nothing had changed too much here. Uchiha Fugaku was still the Hokage. The man named A, fourth of the name, was still in power as well. The leader of Suna was still Raza, but there were rumors that a woman puppeteer, named Chigusa, might take over soon. Mist was headed by Yagura, who had gotten rid of his major opponents in a terrible purge of his government. Oniki still wasn't ready to relinquish his station. The Land of Rivers was gaining traction under a leader named Tao. And the Nation of Rain, headed by the man named Nagato, he had recognized the name was becoming very powerful, too fast, according to the other villages. He was somewhere up north, in the Land of Hot Springs. It was a long way down to Konoha, which would take him a week in his weakened state, he estimated. He didn't know the way, so it might be a bit longer, even. He needed to get back. Then he'd get answers from Sarutobi and what? 3 years had gone by. Everyone likely thought him dead. Sasuke had probably become strong, so much stronger, with Kakashi training him. He would get over it, and he had his family. The old man, Sarutobi, if he was still alive, had a lot to answer to, but he didn't really feel like seeing him. Biwako would definitely manage. Sakura was in civilian school, likely. What was it called, high school? She probably had distanced herself some from shinobi life. He never even had the time to write to Karin. What did she think? Konohamaru? He was young, he would bounce back, too. Kakashi was a veteran, and had weathered more losses than anybody under 30 should. He would likely be fine. Did he even need to come back? Ino. What about Ino? He knew there was the possibility she might have liked him. And well, he might have started to feel something himself, even though he hadn't known what to make of it. But she had been 13, then. She was almost 17 now, and had thought him dead for more than 3 years. He was still 13. What hope did he have there? This was ridiculous. He stopped walking. His heart ached. Coming home might be a bad idea, even. And there was the fact that for the first time since he had joined the academy, he was free. Entirely free. Why did it scare him so? He had wanted this, didn't he? He counted the money he had on himself. It didn't amount to much. About 5,000 ryo. Not even enough to survive a full month out there. He sighed. He would not go to Konoha. At least not now. He knew he would have to access the fourth safe house at some point. Maybe he'd reconsider, but he didn't think this would be anytime soon. He needed to figure out a few things. Notably how to survive entirely on his own. He'd stay a few days, maybe longer in this fishing village. It looked like a safe place. While he was near the sea, fishing to eat would be easy enough. He'd need money to get somewhere to sleep. Sleeping in a tent was sometimes a necessity for shinobi out in the wild, but that was not very restful sleep. If he actually wanted to get stronger, and he needed to, then he would need a decent place to sleep. What else did people with a shinobi background do for money? Oh. Most of them became mercenaries for hire. Killing a single person had been more than enough for him. He'd figure something less lethal. Maybe there would be some tracking missions, or capturing rogue shinobi. He could sell some seals. Nothing too dangerous, but basic supplies shouldn't take him too much time to figure out. They could go for decent amounts of money, especially if they required low amounts of maintenance. Maybe he could teach some general chakra manipulation, or even taijutsu for a decent price. Then he figured it out. Why had he gotten stuck on such a narrow worldview? He didn't have to rely solely on his shinobi skills. He posted an ad a few hours later. A job agency. No job too small. None too big. Need a shelf brought up, help on a construction site, one more fisherman? Fair rates. Friendly and experienced service. Leave a message in postal box number 11, fishing district for a quote. Naruto pinned it wherever he was allowed to. That should do. He nodded to himself. The first jobs came fast. A single day after he had put up his flyers, he had 3 different messages left in the post box he had rented. They were pretty small jobs, for sure. But they would also allow him to keep himself alive for the time being. Once he had confirmed all 3 of them, he rented a small wooden house for 2 weeks, in the most remote district, by paying for a full month up front, leaving him with just enough for a few days of eating. He took a look at the contracts. Landscaping job, painting job, and insect feeding? Well, it seemed like none of these would be too physical for a trio of clones. He created 3 clones, and gave them random names, from the top of his head. Then no jobs came for several days. He had grossly overestimated the demand in this little town. There were only so many jobs a random agency that popped up out of nowhere would be able to receive. What an idiot he had been. It had been easy enough in Konoha, with an endless supply of jobs, demands, and offers. The small village of Umeomayarosa was not Konoha, far from it. He sighed. Where to go from here? Naruto spent the next few days in a funk. A dead friend, nowhere to go. No real plan. And he was spending too much time alone. He had started having conversations with his clones. One of them was ranting about what was wrong with the shinobi world. Naruto tuned him out. He knew exactly what the clone was saying. It was him, after all. We need to move. He ended up saying. One of the clones, currently nose deep in a book about sealing, lifted an eyebrow. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Where? What's the closest town we can get a bounty for the dead Uzumaki? Naruto asked. Legally. Yeah. Sure. I don't really like it, but the guy's dead anyway, so. Another clone confirmed what he already knew. Probably the land of rice. The land of hot springs wants to stay neutral, they don't really do bounties. Can one of you guys look it up? A clone nodded. He thumbed through his book, finding the local map. There is the town of Hiraji, it's close to the border. There would definitely be some demand for shinobi skills, too. Or just demand in general. How far is it? 2 days, I'd say. Let's pack up, then. We're leaving tomorrow. What about this place? We rented it for 1 more week. Fuck this place. The clone shrugged and started packing. Ever since the 9 tails had been extracted, he had felt different. His own chakra seemed to be more abundant, for one. Likely because it wasn't used to hold back the nine tails, and hide the seal itself. He couldn't estimate it very precisely, but it felt as if he were working with about double the amount he previously was able to use. That was without taking in account the chakra the nine tails had left behind. Naruto could feel the deep well of power within him. He had never tried to use it, knowing what it was exactly, but it was there. But the changes that he could not get used to were the physical ones. The seal that Sarutobi had likely put on him years ago had faded. His face had changed shape, ever so slightly, and so had his eyes. His skin was tanner, too. His hair was getting lighter by the day, and his eyes were now a strange shade of purple. And there were some marks on his cheeks that looked like whiskers. He assumed this had something to with the nine tails, too. Naruto would likely get used to the changes, but it was very disconcerting to look in the mirror and have trouble recognizing your own face. He never gave his own name anymore. Sarutobi was a clan that only existed in one village. And he didn't feel as if he belonged there anyway. And his own first name felt too distinctive. He would just use random names when needed. The trek to Hiraji was uneventful, as running hidden in the forest was something every Konoha ninja learned early. Hiraji was not what he had expected. First, it was very crowded and chaotic. All the time. It was easy to get lost because the streets were so narrow. There seemed to be some sort of theme to most of these streets, Naruto thought, because he passed around 10 very similar shops in a row, one after the other. It was hot here, very hot. The town itself felt old, and there was something of older Land of Fire architecture in some buildings. He wasn't sure about the cities and by extension, the land's history, but he wouldn't be too surprised to learn settlers had come from down south. Compared to Konoha, most buildings were pretty low, never exceeding 3-4 floors. He asked several people for directions, until he found the bounty collection office. "So, who's the stiff?" the man in charge asked him. "Huh?" the man sighed. "Is this your first time? Who's the bounty on?" Oh. He understood, now. It's an Uzumaki missing ninja. They might have been somewhat related, now that he stopped to think about it. The man's eyebrows rose. Uzumaki, eh? Thought most of them were gone, now. They are, yes. First name? There's almost no Uzumaki left in the book either, we assumed most were dead. Sujin, I think. The man frowned. We don't have it. What? Really? Nope. Where was he from? IWA, I guess. That's where his brother was from. There's no Uzumaki from IWA. The man frowned. Was the kid wasting his time? No Uzumaki Ryujin either. Was there just no bounty on them? That had been most of his plan. The man hesitated. There was a man named Ryujin, but he came from the Dode clan. He has a bounty on him for killing a few people and defecting, years ago. I remember that one. Yes. I think that's the guy. But he called himself Uzumaki. He might have had ties with the clan. Definitely looked like one. He paused, a weird expression on his face. So. Wait. Let me get this right. Yes. The stiff you have in this scroll is Dode Sujin. He pointed at him, hesitant. Yeah. I guess so. What's the deal? He was one of Iwa's sealing experts. I wasn't aware he had left the village either, before today. He checked his book. But you're right. We have a bounty on this guy. S-rank missing ninja, too. He stole several village secrets when he escaped. I assume he joined his brother, then. The corpse will go to IWA, and they'll pay us. We'll give you the money right now, though, of course. S-rank. Naruto wondered. You didn't know? Not at the time, no. There were some ridiculous things, when it came to the ninja world. But hearing this child had defeated one of Iwa's best almost topped the list. But a stiff was a stiff. Very well. Let me make sure the stiff is who you say he is, and I'll get you the money. The amount is 30 million ryo. Naruto's eyes widened. 30 millions. That was more money than he'd ever seen in his life. This would change everything. Not trusting his voice, he nodded. He handed the man the scroll, who unsealed the corpse on the table. The dead man looked very similar to his brother. And what a terrible face he had made in his last moments. Naruto looked away while the man examined the corpse. It's still warm. The man said. I sealed the corpse as soon as the guy died. Well, the fourth head, technically. The man nodded. He left the guy on the table and went into one of the back rooms. He came back with a briefcase, handing him the promised money in cash. Most bounty hunters wanted a money trail leading to them. Naruto bowed, sealing the case immediately inside the seal he had on his hand. Bad practice or not, he was not about to walk around with millions in cash. He left the corpse on the table, and exited the building. He had a lot to think about. Despite what the bondsman had said, the corpse wouldn't be sent to IWA. He had a call to make, instead. Somebody had been very interested in a few specific corpses, and had asked to be warned if one of them passed the doors of the office. He was sure the man in question had asked the same request of most bounty offices in the elemental nations. If somebody had the money, as well as the influence to do this kind of thing, it was that man. The man in question arrived the next day, his aura as chilling as ever. He laughed, paid the bondsman the sum he had promised without blinking and left with the corpse sealed in a scroll he had brought for this specific purpose. He went straight into Hiraji's streets. There was someone he had to find. Naruto was staying in a pretty unremarkable hotel. Now that his money troubles were seemingly over for, well, the next decade, it seemed, he was wondering where to go. He could quite literally go anywhere he pleased. For the first time in more than a week, he felt optimistic. Maybe he could go around the world, learn more about chakra for a few years. He could become stronger, build a new life somewhere when he was done with that. Then he would have to sneak into Konoha, find the scrolls he had promised his father he would find. Yeah. Sounds like a plan. He said, to himself. It would be his first taste of freedom. It was exhilarating, just as it was scary. Now, which country first? Which one was safe, and still at peace? Somebody knocked at his door, softly. He stiffened, looking toward the window. Did he have time to escape? No, wait, it was not necessarily an enemy. There was no one after him, now. He relaxed a bit. It was likely the hotel's personnel. He still sealed everything important within himself. He'd have to find a better solution, as it was considered kinda risky. He opened the door and froze. A pale-faced man loomed over him. Naruto couldn't feel his chakra. This was not a civilian, though, far from it. If he focused, Naruto could feel a bottomless well of energy coiled within the man. It reminded him of a snake. The man's golden eyes stared at him, shining with interest. Kukyukyuku. What do we have here? A little Uzumaki. Or is it Namikaze, perhaps? Chapter 23, Snake's Bargain. As soon as Naruto heard the words, he paled. Channeling lightning chakra to his legs was almost second nature, by now. He bounced off the floor, arms held in front of his face. He would escape through the window, going straight through it. Something grabbed his ankle, slamming him against the floor. It held him there and it hissed. A snake. Ow. The man laughed. Such bad manners, little Namikaze. Did sensei teach you nothing? Sensei? Are you a student of the old man? Poor manners indeed. The man smiled, revealing 2 perfect teeth. Sarutobi-sensei must have become too lax, over time. Sarutobi had taken very few students in his life. He's clearly not Tsunade, nor Jiraiya. He had never met either, but he knew they summoned slugs and toads, respectively. That left. You're Orochimaru, aren't you? He laughed in delight. That is who I am. Orochimaru's golden eyes seemed as if they were piercing him. He spoke, his voice carrying the tone of someone who was used to people obeying him without question. Would you care to join me for a walk? They walked in the crowded streets of Hiraji. Orochimaru seemed to glide through a crowd, never touching people, and never slowing down. Naruto struggled to follow him. The land of rice once was part of the same empire that became the land of fire. This is the reason you may have seen a few similarities. The man said. Naruto said nothing. He was not sure why he was making conversation, nor what he wanted exactly. Orochimaru shrugged. Have it your way. I had hoped that fresh air might make you more amenable. What do you want? Naruto grit out. Orochimaru tilted his head. That's a very broad question. There are so many things I desire. Enough with the riddles. If you are here to bring me back to the village, there's nothing I can do. If you want to kill me, then go ahead. The man sighed. You really have no patience, do you? What is this about? I have lost the 9 tails. Konoha can afford to let me go. I figured as much. Naruto stopped in his tracks. There was something he was missing here. How do you know? His first instinct was to Pamakunao, or channel lightning, but it would be of no use here. I have my sources. Are you even with Konoha? He thought he was, as he had seen his name on the active lists, but he had never seen the man. And 3 years was a long time. Now that's a more interesting question. Orochimaru laughed. He considered. You could say that I am. In a way. I don't think ninja villages work this way. Yes or no? Naruto gritted out. Well, my case might be a bit peculiar. Sensei always had a soft spot for all 3 of us. Do you mean the legendary 3? Of course. Jiraiya is the only one really active by now, and even he spends most of his time outside the village. Knowing him, I cannot assure you that this time is entirely productive. Tsunade. He sighed. Tsunade is running away, and has been doing so for a while. What about you? Sarutobi didn't say much about his students in general, and even less when it came to Orochimaru. The man bowed in a dramatic fashion. You could say that I am more of a free agent. While I am still technically on the books, only a war at Konoha's doorstep would force me back home. The 5th allows this. Of course he does. He laughed. He's the one who set this arrangement up in the first place. I am a researcher, first and foremost. As long as I get the village some useful findings, they will simply let me be. Useful findings? Are you going to send me back? Naruto asked, defensive. Orochimaru looked at him. That will depend on you. Catch my interest, and I might let you do as you want. You have the look of someone who doesn't want to go back all that much. I don't. He laughed. Did you not enjoy the shinobi life? There are some aspects I do hate. He said, distaste obvious. Killing was one. And blind, undying loyalty to people who lie to me is not something I can stand. Orochimaru looked at him, a little more seriously. Then we may have this much in common. Somehow, Naruto relaxed enough to take a sip of his cup. They were sitting in the back of a tea shop, where Orochimaru, with a simple glance, had gotten them a private room. The comparison to a snake den was all too easy to make. You seem to value truth. I do, as well. Orochimaru said, finally stopping to talk in circles. There is a time for lies, as any shinobi knows. But you have something of value to me. For this reason, I won't bother lying to you. I will ask you to do the same. Naruto licked his dry lips. What do you want then, Orochimaru-san? The man smiled. He looked pretty unamused. Information about Akatsuki and their plans. Who is Akatsuki? Not a person, I can assure you. Orochimaru said dryly. The organization who kidnapped you. 3 years ago, if memory serves. Naruto's head whipped up. They are an organization. He nodded. Likely based in the land of rain, though I can't confirm. They are very secretive. A man with a Sharingan teleported me to a hideout. It was raining, and we were high up in the sky. Naruto supplied. Orochimaru nodded again. This likely confirmed his suspicions, then. This would be a Megakure, yes. What else did you see? I was unconscious during the entire nine-tail extraction. I felt around a dozen people's chakra, and I'm sure they are the ones who pulled the beast out of me. You felt their chakra? He nodded. I apparently have some very rudimentary chakra sensing abilities. Orochimaru's eyes lit with interest. Would you be able to recognize these chakra signatures you encountered there? Naruto hesitated. If they were close enough, yes. That's not enough. If I trained my ability, yes. Then, if you don't mind, you will be spending a bit more time with me, I'm afraid. There's someone who can help you train your sensing ability. Why do you need to find them in the first place? Orochimaru sighed. Akatsuki is dangerous to me in my own ambitions. I am still unsure about the specifics, but Nagato, its leader, is, well, a madman. He would destroy half the world, if it meant cowing the other half. He shrugged. Not that I would care all that much, but ever since I refused his offer to join him, I've been on his bad side. Once he attains the power he craves, he will stop at nothing to destroy me. And while it pains me to admit it, I'm no match for him as things stand. So I want to prevent that. I see. Did you see any of their faces? Just 3 of them. There were 2 Uzumaki and... No, maybe 3. Elaborate. Uzumaki Ryujin and Sujin were there, for sure. There was a man in a machine. That would be Nagato, then. Ryujin and Sujin, then. He chuckled. This brings me back. You met them. You could say that. We fought in the Third War. Though they went by Dode, back then. Naruto saw a chance to get some explanations. What is this all about? The Dode thing. Orochimaru looked curious. So you didn't know? Back in the Second War, the village of Uzushio, Konoha's ally and where your mother's clan originated from, was destroyed. I think the teachers mentioned this, back at the academy. It was pretty vague though. I don't think Konoha is going to go about this one in detail. Orochimaru shrugged. Why not? I'll get to it. When Uzushio was destroyed, IWA stole some of its children, and raised them as its own. Kiri did the same. The Dode clan was one of the clans that took in 2 children. Twins, in fact. Naruto had a sick feeling. They took them in. Technically, they shifted their memories around until their only loyalty was to IWA, but yes, you could say that. But that's brainwashing. Sure. Orochimaru said, casually. It's also somewhat common in the shinobi world. Does Konoha do the same? Well. Orochimaru smiled a mirthless grin. Isn't this pretty similar to what Sensei did to you? Naruto had realized. He had simply preferred not to mention it. And well, somehow, the Uzumaki twins must have found out, realized the truth and escaped, if at different times. That's horrible. The shinobi world often is. Why didn't they, or any other survivor come to Konoha? There was never an Uzumaki clan in Konoha, was there? Simply put, the survivors didn't trust Konoha. They scattered, settled somewhere else, giving up their name, or became mercenaries, for most of them. But, why? Well, that would be because Sarutobi-sensei, who was Hokage at the time, stood by and did nothing to help Uzushio when IWA and Kiri attacked. You'll have to ask him for the details, he never told me more. Knowing him, he probably considers it one of his greatest failures. Naruto said nothing. Despite his faults, he really looked up to the old man, even now, after all the lies. He would have to ask him the day he got back to Konoha. It didn't seem like he could avoid it forever. Less and less. He changed topics. What does the organization? Akatsuki, you said. What do they want with the tailed beasts? They said they would come for the one tail, as well. Ah. Uchiha Sasuke. I've heard of him. Naruto sighed in relief. He was likely alive, then. This is something I'm not sure about. I have a few theories, though. Tell me, please. Nagato is likely aiming for world domination. He will probably use the Biju's power for that. Either by making himself, or somebody loyal, a Jinchuriki. Or he plans on making a weapon. Or he needed the Nine Tails life force to restore his body. Seeing Naruto's face, he continued. He has the Rinnegan, a mystical eye, which has not been seen since the Sage of Six Paths. The Sage of Six Paths? I thought this was a fairy tale. Orochimaru shrugged. Maybe it is. But that's what his eyes seem to be. Its powers fit some of the legends. Control over gravity, chakra absorption, mastery over all 5 elements, and apparently, even more. That's a lot to take in. It is. So you want to stop him? If necessary. First, I will need to find who is involved and what they plan on doing. If it turns out to be nothing of concern to me, I'll stay out of it. What is it you're even after, in the first place? Orochimaru laughed and said simply. Immortality. He continued. When I heard from my informant in Rain that some of the higher UPS were beside themselves because a prisoner had managed to escape from the top of the tower, stealing Uzumaki Sujin's research, and made the man disappear at the same time. Well, I became curious. Naruto stiffened. He had not forgotten what kind of man was sitting in front of him, no matter how affable he might pretend to be. This was more than 3 years ago, though. I bribed some people to warn me of any development concerning anybody I knew had previously been affiliated with Akatsuki. Including those who worked with bounty hunters. You never know when a precious body might appear. Orochimaru continued. The prisoner, who apparently was just a boy, vanished off the face of the earth in a flash, mid-fall. There is only one technique I know of that can do this. Naruto stayed silent. Senju Tobirama, and later Namikaze Minato's Hiraishin. He enunciated. The rest was putting pieces together. A Sarutobi boy, who didn't really seem very Sarutobi at all, born on the day the 4th Hokage made the most powerful of the beasts disappear. Sensei must have lost his edge. I do wonder how you managed to learn the jutsu when men twice your age couldn't do it, though. I didn't. Not really. I see. Well, you can tell me about this, and the reason you still look 13, later. There's something else I'm more interested in. Orochimaru's eyes turned hungry. Now. Little Namikaze. Do you still have Uzumaki Sujin's research? Naruto thought fast. I have it. Then I will buy it from you. For a fair price. He steeled himself. I'm not interested in selling. Orochimaru looked amused. Oh, no. I want to learn from it. We can both use it, alternating. I'm sure we can find some sort of agreement. There's more that I want. You're looking for immortality, aren't you? The 9 tails might help you with that. You said it had a life force strong to restore someone's body. Orochimaru nodded. Certainly. It is also currently sealed in the highest tower of Rain. He shrugged. Not all of it. What? He was taking a big gamble here. The 9 tails and I struck a deal. It left me 2 tails worth of its power. It is a limited amount, so I cannot offer you much of it, but you can study it. You are telling the truth. Orochimaru licked his lips. Yes. On top of that, I am also descended from the Uzumaki clan. And I have carried the strongest beast for years. Yes, this is true. Your cells might prove to be very valuable. Naruto waited. Orochimaru spoke. So. You want the information contained within his research, too. An interest in Fuinjutsu, I assume. Yes. And. Something else. Name your price. I will give you access to my blood, and my cells. As well as what I can spare of the 9 tails. Naruto hesitated again. He closed his eyes. In return. I will ask for your guidance and training. I need strength, the kind I won't be able to reach on my own. Make me your apprentice. Orochimaru laughed. It was a real, full laugh this time. I accept your bargain. Chapter 24, Under the Moon's Glare. Meet me in 2 weeks, in the town named Mukage. That's what Orochimaru had said. During the first week on his own, his money troubles being nothing more than a memory now, Naruto realized how much he had overestimated his ability to progress on his own. The more he practiced, the more he felt he was running in circles, inside a square room. There was only so much you could learn by practicing the same drills over and over again. Jutsu creation was still beyond him, but maybe the Snake Sage could help him there. The only thing he felt he was making some real progress in was Fuinjutsu, courtesy of Uzumaki Sujin's scroll. And even then, some of it was simply too advanced for him as of yet. He still wasn't sure what the man had been rambling about when his research went into some sort of flesh carving and sealing thing. All of these reasons made him leave for Mukage earlier than needed, with 3 days to spare. It was very different from Hiraji, where one had been a crowded, overcrowded, even city. The other was a quiet little town. In a word, it was unremarkable. There were several people he had seen around town that he was sure had been shinobi in the past. The way they carried themselves, reacted sharply to noise said as much. Still, for some reason, he felt safe here. Orochimaru met him in another tea shop. He really must love tea, Naruto thought at noon. He was wearing a dark yukata, and tomo earrings. Despite looking entirely casual, Naruto was almost certain he had enough weapons on him to make any ninja pale. Not that the man seemed to need weapons. The people seemed to know him, judging from their cheerful smiles when they saw him. Orochimaru simply nodded politely in return. Naruto-kun. Orochimaru. Sensei. He tried out. The man laughed. That will do. Come with me. They left the tea shop, and Orochimaru led him to the forest. It was strange, the way there seemed to be no way to orient yourself in there. The trees all looked the same, and sun was hard to pinpoint in the sky. Orochimaru pulsed his chakra. The illusion dissipated. Where there had only been a forest now stood a door leading underground. After you. Orochimaru said. Is this an underground bunker? The man snorted. Of course not, but we need to pass through this underground passage to reach it. Who would want to live underground? I am the Snake Sage, not the rat one. Who indeed? A woman greeted them as she passed them. Naruto-kun, meet Mitarashi Anko, my first apprentice. You will be her junior, in a way. Naruto hesitated. What name was he supposed to give? Orochimaru noticed his hesitation. I trust every single person here. You should do the same. Well, then. I am Uzumaki Naruto. Pleased to meet you. He bowed. Anko grinned. What a polite boy. Are you the Namikaze, then? I am also the Namikaze, yes. Orochimaru gave him a questioning look. Uzumaki seemed to fit better, somehow. Suit yourself. Naruto was given a small tour of Orochimaru's base of operations. True to his word, it was an above-ground structure, mostly built out of fireproof wood. There was one flat, circular main level, with no real ceiling. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the whole place. On the outside perimeter of the main level, wooden stairs climbed up the rocks and trees. The base was built in the middle of wooden balconies overlooking the main level, too. The central area was a hub, with a notice board full of stickied papers. People were walking around, pretty casually. Somebody was roasting meat over a fire, and Naruto heard a smith work on a weapon somewhere. All in all, it was way more cozy than he had expected from the man. Don't be fooled by appearances. Orochimaru said, leading him to the second floor, where small wooden buildings stood, separate from each other. There are enough seals and protections over this place to keep unwanted guests out. It might look open, vulnerable even, but it is far from it. Orochimaru gestured to one of the empty wooden buildings. These shall be your new living quarters. Do what you want with them, as long as you don't disturb the other residents. This is the way we operate here. Naruto nodded, grateful. Now, I shall retrieve your mentor from where I had her stationed. She and I will start your training when I come back here. Very well. Thank you, Orochimaru-sensei. The man left. Naruto opened the door to the room. There was no key. He had the feeling Orochimaru was either encouraging him to learn how to ensure his room was private on his own, or did simply not care about his privacy. The room was pretty bare, with a bed, a table, and a chest as its only furniture. He would do something about it, if he was going to stay here for a while. It was much larger than he had thought though, bigger on the inside than it was from the outside. He wondered how it had been done. It was a bit early, but he had woken up early this morning, afraid to miss the snake sage. He laid down on his bed and fell asleep soon enough. He is the grandson of the first son. Asuka doesn't know of this before he is grown. His father doesn't talk much about his own father, only referring to him as that traitor. It's no wonder, either. His grandfather left a bloody legacy in his wake. People don't get too close to them. We are only a means to an end for them. This is what Asuka knows the people think. Sometimes, looking at his own father's eyes, smoldering with an emotion he is not sure he wants to recognize, he thinks they might be right. But he never turns on his family, his sons. On the battlefield, his father is like a raging fire. The greatest warrior of his time, some call him. To his frustration, he is compared to the traitor. Often. In Asuka, the envy, the jealousy grows. He has not inherited his father's talent. He covets it. His father is like the flame. That day, Asuka was like lightning. And just like lightning, he strikes when his father suspects it the least. When he turns to him, his precious eyes wide with betrayal, not even his strong chakra can save him. Asuka feels his eyes bleed before he takes his father's as his own. He becomes much worse than anybody had feared. Soon enough, his sons take a name of their own, wanting to put distance between them and their monstrous father. They call themselves the Uchiha. The fan that feeds the flames. I almost forgot about these. Naruto grumbled when he woke up. It was the middle of the night. Again. Once he was sure he could trust Orochimaru, he would ask him about it. This might take a while, though. The man had a peculiar way of doing things. A sort of casual detachment from most things, until it affected him directly. Naruto didn't quite know what to think of it. Where did that man draw the line? Killing was obviously nothing to someone who had been a shinobi for decades. Naruto splashed some cold water on his face. He went out of his quarters. There was a large campfire in the central area. There were some people talking on the balconies, but he didn't care about them. Sitting next to the fire, there was a shade of hair he would recognize anywhere. His breath caught. Could it be? He went down. His hunch had been right. Same red eyes, same red hair, same glasses. She was grown now, though, closer to an adult than a child. I had a feeling it was you. Karen said quietly. Karen. She nodded, hesitant. Your chakra is different, but it's you. I can't believe it. Me neither. I was told you were dead, years ago. She rubbed her eyes. And then I felt your chakra, today. I couldn't sleep. Karen, I'm so sorry. I get the impression it's not your fault. She looked him up and down. You look exactly the same as the last time we met. Well, besides the hair, she looked closer. The eyes. Even the face, too. Not so close, then. What happened? A space-time technique went wrong. Very wrong. Ino said you had gotten captured. That's when it happened, yes. Let me tell you. He skipped over the reason they had gotten him, just mentioning a powerful chakra, unique to him. So they're Akatsuki, then. Orochimaru-sama has been looking for information about them. So he told me. Naruto said. They lapsed into comfortable silence. The fire roared. Everyone's asleep. This place looks so peaceful like this. Yeah. Even though the rest of the world seems ready to eat itself. It always seemed like war, or another threat, was looming in the background. Karen nodded. I agree. But even if one nation won over the others, the problems still wouldn't go away. I doubt it, too. I'm Uzumaki. That's what Orochimaru told me. Naruto looked at her in surprise. You are. Seems like everybody is Uzumaki, now. I might as well ask Sakura, at this point. He didn't voice this out. She nodded. He offered to take me out of Kusa. I still don't know what he said to the higher UPS, but when he was done, they let me go without saying anything. To this day, I still don't know if it's because I was Uzumaki, or just because my mother was a foreigner. But I always stood out. Her hand gripped the railing. The people of Kusa treated me like a tool. She laughed wryly when she saw Naruto's face. No, more than the usual shinobi. Even for an Uzumaki, I have a strong life force. By consuming my chakra, I can heal others, or myself. She showed him her arm, which was covered in bite marks. Karen. I think people despise what they can't understand. This is likely why bloodlines were as revered as they were feared. And why so many Jinchuriki end up the way they are. Who could blame them for wanting revenge? Naruto nodded. I used to resent my abilities. I can understand. Now, I think that everything a person has might be important in some way. Naruto smiled. And your abilities are part of what makes you you. Yeah. I have them because they're needed. We're all needed. It's the same for everything else. My power. Yours. Everything we inherited from our parents. I think you're right, Karen. Karen smiled at him. She was beautiful. Now I know that it's okay. Just to be alive, yeah no. It felt like a great weight was lifted from his shoulders. He had been blaming his father for burdening him with the nine tails. He had been blaming Sarutobi for hiding so much from him. He still was. But it didn't change who he was. Sarutobi, Namikaze, Uzumaki. That didn't matter. The dreams didn't matter. He was himself, and that should be enough. She had opened up to him. Somehow, he felt he could do the same. There was also the fact that he had known her before, but they were basically strangers again, now. There's something wrong with me, Karen. What do you mean? There were times. I heard a voice. I know it comes from within me. I know it's not the nine tails. And there are the nightmares, too. They're not just dreams. What do you think this is about? A bloodline thing? What are they about? I don't think so. Or at least, it's not related to either of my parents. They seem to be centered around the Uchiha, and their ancestors. They usually end up, in a terrible way. I think they're about people that may or may not have existed, and turned bad. Karen seemed deep in thought. Chakra can leave strange imprints. This might be something like that. I will look into it, Naruto. You really don't have to. She smiled. Sure, but I want to. He decided to tell her everything. Karen. Can you feel the second source of chakra inside me? She nodded. Yes. It doesn't feel like your own. There's something. She paused. It's not human, is it? It's too big, too different. He nodded. 16 years ago, my father sealed something inside me. He told her about the sealing, about growing up in a lie. He told her about the nine tails, and why Akatsuki had captured him in the first place. About his father. Karen rubbed her glasses. That's quite a lot. He nodded. And you're Uzumaki as well, then? Karen asked. From my mother's side, yes. She laughed. No wonder your head is so thick. I could say the same about you. Remember when you beat that guy to a bloody pulp? She blushed. You remember that? For me, it was a few months ago. Yeah. True. They spent most of the night talking, reminiscing. Karen asked. So? What are you doing with Orochimaru-sama, exactly? He promised to train me. She looked surprised. He, actually did. Yeah. I don't think he took a student since Anko. Is she any good? He asked. She's the second strongest ninja here. You must have offered him something of value, didn't you? He shrugged. Some scrolls that I found in my help with his experiments for longevity. Immortality. Yes, that. Well. This is a very rare privilege. Make the most of it. Orochimaru-sama is probably the most knowledgeable man in a few different fields. Oh. So he was that good. Maybe this was going to be worth his time, then. And worth dealing with the man. Karen stood up. This was very nice. I would suggest you eat something light, we'll get started soon. Huh. She looked at him curiously. He got it. Wait. You're my chakra sensing mentor. Karen laughed. Of course. That's why Orochimaru-sama brought me back. She looked at the sun. Training starts in 2 hours. Hope you got some rest. He groaned. Chapter 25, of Ancient Gods. Come sit next to me. Karen said. Naruto did. Closer. He could smell her perfume. She laughed a bit when she noticed his discomfort. If she had been 13, she would definitely have felt the same awkwardness. But she was 16, and he still looked like a child, so. Not really. And now. Can you feel my chakra? Yup. Okay, so you do have the most rudimentary part down already. Continue. He waited. Then waited some more. Are you doing anything? Yes. I was pulsing my chakra. Pretty low intensity, though. I will go a bit higher. She said. Now. Still can't feel anything. And now. No. Now. Nope. Ah, I think I feel something. Good. She nodded. Can you estimate people's chakra capacity? Only when they are very strong, for now. That's what I expected. No wonder your space-time jutsu went sideways. He shrugged. It still worked. Because you had the Hokage give you a shortcut. Would you use it again? Fuck no. I don't want to end up in the next century. Karen snorted. Thought so. How did you learn about your sensing abilities, even? Is this an Uzumaki thing? Not particularly. I mean, I don't think so. I always had some ability with it, to be honest. My eyes are pretty bad, so I guess that's how I navigated things before I got my first pair of glasses. How come you never mentioned it, back then? She shrugged. I thought everybody could do the same. He laughed. Orochimaru observed Naruto. The boy looked strong for his age, and healthy too. He had potential, for sure. Maybe in time, he could really get rid of some of his enemies for him. Very well. He said. Let us see what you can do as of now. I suggest you give your best. Naruto nodded. The exercise ends when I say so, or when you draw first blood. Use any means necessary. Naruto unsealed one of his swords. There was no chance of accidentally killing this man. He summoned 2 clones, and a lightning one. They reached for sharp wire. Static crackled in the air. Orochimaru smiled as they leapt. Let's end this here. Orochimaru said, voice even. Naruto was breathing hard. He fell over, trying to get his heart to settle down. They have been at it for the last 2 hours. The boy is good. Orochimaru mused. He wasn't about to go all out against a child, of course. But he actually had to pay attention, so he was pleasantly surprised. Yet. This is not going to be enough. Not even close. Someday, he would be strong. But, as Naruto told him, he was planning on facing the Akatsuki to free the Nine Tails and uphold his promise. He could not afford to wait. And training the boy to face Nagato and his motley crew for him was safer for himself, Orochimaru knew. So he would give him the best education he could. The boy would get rid of his enemies for him. He would make sure he would not turn against him, too. It wouldn't do to replace his Uzumaki problem with another one. Speaking of the boy, there was some real potential. Namikaze and Uzumaki. The Nine Tails chakra. On top of this, he was a natural at the shinobi arts, despite his obvious reluctance. Something that Orochimaru didn't like to admit to himself was that he had trouble communicating and so, teaching with people who were average. The prodigies, geniuses, he would make shine. But he was too far from normal to help regular shinobi. Naruto would do perfectly, then. Eat and rest. We will meet again at 3 in the afternoon. Orochimaru said, before disappearing. He had a corpse to dissect. Eating could wait. Naruto panted an answer and drags himself to the hub. There were only 5 people currently eating. Karen was one of them, so he sat next to her. He asked her if she had any news from Konoha. Ah, you mean from your friends? She asked, understanding in her eyes. I haven't heard anything about them. Well. Karen thought. I did not write to any of them in more than a few months, now. Oh. Naruto said, disappointed. She smiled. But I can tell you what I know. Please. Ino is doing good, she's been a chunin for some time now. Really? He smiled in relief. That's good. How is she? I think she's doing fine, now. She took your apparent death pretty hard, though. Ah. He said nothing more. What was there to say? Sasuke has been out of the village for a while, but he came back a few times with his sensei. Kakashi. No, Jiraiya. The Sunin. That's him. Orochimaru-sama complains about him a lot, but I think they're good friends. He doesn't really mention people he doesn't think about. How is he? He's built quite the reputation, outside of the village, actually. I don't know how strong he is, but after years with one of the Sannin, you can assume he can at least hold his own against most ninjas. He's a master of fire release, supposedly. That's Sasuke. He hadn't expected anything less. Toru is fine too, he. Naruto's heart skipped a beat. Say that again. Toru is fine. There are rumors he's going to become a Jonin soon, actually. Toru is alive? Naruto asked, his voice tight. Well, yeah. I mean he's missing an eye, but that's been the case for long. She looked at his pale face. Did something happen during the mission? Yeah. I saw someone cut his throat open. Karen gasped. Never mind, if he's alive. He sighed in relief. I'm very glad to hear it. Not sure how he fixed that, but... He wiped his eyes. That's great. He smiled. What about Sakura? He asked, and Karen winced. Well, that's the thing. Nobody knows where Sakura is. So, Sakura had apparently left the village, leaving only a note behind. Karen had gotten the info from Ino, who didn't know much more about it. Her parents had been tight-lipped about it, so she assumed it had something to do with them. But no matter how she pushed, and Ino was good at pushing and prodding, they would not say much more, only confirming that she had left willingly. Since she had been discharged honorably, just like any civilian, she was free to leave. Naruto was worried. But there was no way he was going to find her without more information, so he just hoped she knew what she was doing. It is Sakura. She probably planned everything out. He had to tell himself that a few more times. Lightning release, then. I can help you with that. Orochimaru nodded. But you're at a decent level already. I can teach you jutsu, but when it comes to progressing your master over it, you're going to have to keep on practicing. Naruto nodded. He had thought so. Orochimaru continued. Chakra quality is built over time. You cannot refine yours much more right now, because your chakra has not matured enough yet. Is there a way to accelerate the process? Same as building bigger reserves. Use it until you're running low, and then let it refill. Over and over again. I see. Thank you. It might be wiser to focus your efforts on wind release, for the time being. You are in luck, for this is my main affinity. Let's not waste any time. By the time he went back to bed, he was wondering how he was going to survive this. Orochimaru seemed to make sure to push him to his exact limit, and then a bit more. He almost had a sixth sense for it. You're a fast learner. Orochimaru said, the next morning. And your clone learning trick is pretty interesting. Naruto panted. Thanks. I try. Is this going to be enough, though? What do you mean? For your goals. You want to free the Nine Tails. And Akatsuki will come after you, once they learn about you. At this rate, you would be Jonin material in 2, maybe 3 years. No doubt. Naruto said nothing. Will this be enough? No. Can you afford to progress at this rate? No. Orochimaru smiled. We both know that Akatsuki might move faster. I do not know what they're planning right now. The organization did not do anything openly in the last years. Capturing you was their boldest move yet. And even then, they kept their association with Rain hidden. I wasn't supposed to survive, as far as I know. Exactly. What happens to you if the Nine Tails disappears, or else? I will die, most likely. Maybe lose my chakra. To him, both options were basically as bad. The way the Nine Tails had looked at him when they sealed their bargain didn't really imply anything good, should he fail to uphold his part. That's what I thought. Orochimaru nodded. Then you are living on borrowed time. Naruto sighed. He already knew this, deep down. He had just wanted to keep his head in the sand a bit longer. It was obvious that the man was trying to lead him to some option he might not want to consider if the circumstances were not so dire, too. What do you propose, then? I assume you have something that might work. Orochimaru's eyes gleamed. As a matter of fact, I do. The dissection room was a pretty morbid place, of course. It was somewhat cold too, even if the corpses were kept cold mostly thanks to seals made for this express purpose. What are we here for? Naruto asked. Knowing that dissecting corpses was something every village did was one thing. Seeing it was another. He didn't like the experience much. You're seeing it. They were standing in front of Uzumaki Sujin's naked corpse. You could have covered him. Orochimaru laughed. What use does a corpse have for modesty? Besides, what is all over his body is what we are here for. Take a closer look. Scars rippled over the corpse's skin. There were patterns in there, and ink mixed with them. What is this? Seals. Close enough. It's his life's work, a modern twist on an old ritual, with mystical ties. Something that likely worked for those of the Uzumaki bloodline. Naruto looked at him, now intrigued, despite the dead body in the room with them. They are specific seals carved with intent into his body, linked to his mind and soul, meant to repurpose his chakra to enhance his capabilities. Orochimaru said with delight. He still died like any other man. Of course, of course. Orochimaru waved away. The fourth specialized in this kind of instant assassination. You'll find that most people, when unprepared, cannot do much about their brains being turned to mush. It's an ancient art, one that was practiced long ago, when the Uzumaki were at war. Later on, it evolved into the sealing style used to create Jinchuriki. What does it have to do with us? Naruto said, cutting through his long-winded tirade. The man talked too much. Isn't it obvious? Orochimaru was ecstatic. We're going to steal his expertise and use it on you, using the Nine Tails to circumvent most of the drawbacks. Naruto said nothing for a while. Is there a reason it fell out of favor? Orochimaru shrugged. Sure. The art was constantly evolving, so of course, there could be some unintended side effects. It had a pretty high mortality rate, even for the Uzumaki clan. Figures. And that's why you decided. This was our best bet. Most Uzumaki didn't have a Biju's chakra floating around in their gut. Its chakra is as close to divine as it gets. That should cover you, as far as mysticism goes. And most Uzumaki didn't have me, either. That had been a week ago. Training resumed normally. Karen taught him how to use his sensor abilities. Orochimaru made him a bit stronger, faster and better every day. But he could see the limits. His body could only grow so fast. His mind could only take so much. The Nine Tails chakra was floating around inside him, uselessly. Naruto didn't know how much time he had. In the end, Orochimaru had known what he would choose from the start. That's probably why he had spent even more time studying the corpse, as well as his research. Bastard. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Orochimaru said, 2 weeks later. I hope so. Naruto answered. And doing them all before your puberty is over will allow you to make the most out of them. I shall keep you safe while you recover. They had been making preparations, this whole time, training falling off a little bit. If this worked, they would be able to catch up on this easily. If. Naruto said nothing. He had learned a lot about how this would work. First, there were the drawbacks. For a period of up to 2 years after completing the seals, his chakra network would be working at less than full capacity. So he'd risk being much weaker for a while. For a ninja, that could mean death. The main seals would have to be carved into his skin. It was the only kind of sacrifice that would result in an intent strong enough for it to take. Once a main seal was drawn, the supporting seals could be drawn in ink, and be compacted into the scar. He'd then be free to cover the scar with ink, if he so desired. Now, seals were different from ninjutsu on a fundamental level. You could twist a jutsu to do different things. Seals were made to do exactly one thing. This clarity in intent was what made them work in the first place. The symbols themselves were here as a guideline, of sorts. Then there was the risk of overlapping seals. If they had similar purposes, but worked in 2 different ways, there was always the chance they would disturb the other's function. Which would be bad, at best. Orochimaru was confident in what they had come up with, though. They picked seals that had similar enough functions, and assumed nothing too bad would happen. Naruto wished he felt the same. They needed to start, now. Another drawback was that Naruto had to do it himself. The intent would not be sufficient, otherwise. The older man would just be here to make sure he actually survived the process. Orochimaru had worked out what the symbols meant by cross-referencing Sujin's research and the actual carvings on his body. Most ended up being simplified versions. You still had to carve them into your body, in the end symbols of what they were referencing. Usually divinities that had been worshipped by the old world. The first seal to carve would be the Megatama, above his navel, as a part of the seal that was already there, and visible ever since the 9 tails had been extracted. Long ago, in the elemental nations, it had been a symbol of power and strength. It also meant birth, and fertility, as well the soul and the power of the spirit. Orochimaru had prepared a knife for this express purpose. Now, sitting on the floor, mostly naked, and surrounded by candles, with the supporting seals drawn around him, he realized it wouldn't do. He knew what he needed. Just like he had only been able to do under high duress, he reached inwards, for the ancient feeling he had mostly been ignoring. Lightning sparked in his hand, and a small knife appeared, made out of chakra. Orochimaru looked on without saying a word, surprise in his expression. Naruto hesitated once more. It was too late for regrets. Naruto plunged the knife in his belly. He kept his hands steady, as blood poured out. He focused on the symbol in his mind. Health. Strength. Stamina. Fertility. Soul. Moon. It was like something else took control for a moment. He relinquished control. Chakra. He was chakra. Megatama. Life. Megatama. Power. He carved the seal. He could feel something reaching for him from within. He let it. His chakra pooled into the seal, as he had expected. The 9 tails chakra, that he had almost forgotten about, reached for it too. This part was unexpected. His soul burned. Working with the 9 tails chakra came with one unexpected drawback. Biju chakra was very different from human chakra. Chakra quality came over time. And the Biju had lived for centuries. Their very own physical form was shaped out of raw chakra. The 9 tails was the most powerful of them all, and even at half capacity, only the 8 tails came anywhere close. Using the beasts to power a very human seal, meant for human chakra. Well, that was comparable to using a sledgehammer to kill an ant. Too much. Way too much. Naruto let out a grunt. His jaw was clenched so hard it felt as if he were about to break his teeth altogether. He felt tears run down his face. Naruto managed to pull the supporting seals within the Megatama seal. They settled, covering the wound in black ink. The first one was complete, and it was burning with power. He didn't feel any weaker, either. Was this supposed to happen? If anything, he felt as if he were more awake than he had ever been before. Still, he had 2 more to carve tonight. Ryu was next. He drew the corresponding supporting symbols on the floor, Orochimaru overseeing his work. He took that time to catch his breath. His navel was still on fire. This one would go over his left shoulder. The dragon had been a big part of the Uzumaki clan's iconography. Ryu. Wisdom, strength, masculinity. Luck, glory, hidden knowledge. It wasn't any easier to carve the corresponding seal. But he knew what to expect, now. Blood, pain, fire. For power. For freedom. For his life. The dragon symbol was complete. This time, he screamed when both chakra sources within him filled the seal. He pulled on the sealing marks surrounding him, taking them in, as well. He panted. One more to go. He could barely lift his left arm. He drew the last supporting symbols. Naruto breathed in, hard. He plunged the dagger for the last time. Tengu. Sky. War. Disruption. Combat. Chaos. Swordsmanship. That was the last one, is what he kept repeating to himself. He pulled on the seals, taking them in. Naruto screamed, his voice breaking. His chakra flowed into it. The nine tails did as well. The Tengu seal stood on his right shoulder proudly. All three seals burned. But this, he felt he could manage. He stood up. Orochimaru watched him carefully. He took a few steps, with bare feet, leaving bloody marks on the floor. Then he collapsed. Orochimaru caught him. You did well. Naruto was sick for the next 3 days. Coming in and out of a fever when he could have been training or doing anything else, really sucked. Naruto never got sick. He hoped this was just temporary. If he had managed to fuck himself up completely, well, he'd have time to think about this later. Karen brought him food during these days, and stayed to chat a bit. That was the decent part. He didn't even have the strength to do much reading. He thought he felt a bit better at night, though. The Nine Tails chakra has interfered in ways we didn't expect, I assume. It was the first thing Orochimaru said to him, once he had managed to leave his quarters. Yeah, I think so. You thought it could happen? Naruto sniffled. He was still feeling a bit off. Orochimaru shrugged. It was a possibility, it's very alien in every way. I knew that even if it came to this, it probably wouldn't kill you, though. Seeing Naruto's face, he added. I was right, wasn't I? I guess so. Do you feel anything different? It's a bit too early to tell. I feel a bit antsy though. You've been bedridden for a while. I've been bedridden before. This is a bit different. It's like a craving? For fighting. Maybe. Orochimaru nodded. By any chance, do you also feel a sudden desire to prove your strength? Maybe through fighting, too. And how do you know this? He shrugged. Well, these are some of the main characteristics of the seals, of the creatures we used. You cannot expect to simply reap the benefits without getting none of the flaws, can you now? What? You didn't say anything about this. Well, a Jinchuriki might take on some of its Biju's traits, right? Naruto nodded. You just carved seals dedicated to ancient myths into your skin. 2 of them, in fact. Don't you think I would have liked to know about this earlier? Naruto tried to remain calm, but his blood was boiling. Wait, why was he so angry? He was very slow to anger, usually. Orochimaru playing around with dangerous tools was nothing out of the ordinary. Was this from the seals? He stopped to breathe. Orochimaru looked a bit amused. It won't change you on a fundamental level, though. It's still going to be you. What else can I expect? Orochimaru seemed to hesitate for a second. Hesitate? He never did that. Well, this set should be manageable, but we need to speed up your maturity, if you plan on getting powerful anytime soon. Naruto closed his eyes in consternation. And this sort of seal might influence you a bit more. Chapter 26, The Blade Itself. He wields the flame in one hand. He carries lightning in the other. His crimson eyes see beyond what even his legendary father has seen. If there is such a thing as peace, he will find it. No matter the cost. No matter how many times it took him. At this point, what Naruto considered a good night of sleep was any night he was not dreaming of flames, lightning, or corruption. 1 month had passed since he had completed his first set of seals. Soon, he'd have to move on to the next. He was starting to notice a difference. He had carved 2 different seals with strength as a component. Orochimaru had him do a lot of strength training, insisting that as lightning user, soon to be also when the usual drawbacks of carrying too much muscle mass wouldn't really apply to him. With his natural leaning toward Yang Chakra, he was likely going to be able to grow very strong physically. He might as well make good use of it. The snake sage had him eat so much food that he had been queasy about the amounts, in the beginning. Like most things, he got used to it. Something he hadn't really counted on was his puberty being kick-started by his seals. There were not so many girls around the camp, but he noticed a few of them. Anko was a beautiful woman, if a scary one. Karen was his closest friend here, and even though he was aware she was attractive, he was not about to do something stupid. There was another cute redhead with a foul mouth. She didn't seem very approachable, though, so he steered clear. Still, he was feeling a lot of tension inside himself. Nobody had told him being a teenager would suck this much. His wind release training was going decently, at least. Naruto was definitely not going to use this one in combat yet, but he was able to cut small objects he held in between his 2 hands. He could also blow a wind stream from his mouth to dispel dust clouds. That was about it for the practical side of things. What he did notice was that he did have a bit less chakra to use than before the first carving. Compared to what he had read, though, this was more than manageable. His best guess was that it had been due to the leftover Ninetales chakra interfering. With Orochimaru watching attentively, better than the way he sometimes looked at things as if he were about to eat them, Naruto started drawing symbols on the floor. He settled in the middle. Koho. The butterfly. Spirit. Adulthood. Joy. Longevity. Metamorphosis. Transformation. He summoned a dagger, easier than last time. The symbol, which looked like 2 larger lines representing wings, and a thinner one for the body, went on his upper back, along his spine. He let his chakra fill it, blinking a couple tears away. Naruto sighed and drew the preparations for the next one, which he would carve twice. He braced himself. Wakane. Wisdom. Pondering. Intelligence. Reflection. Self-mastery. As his only mind-focused seal, and the only one he felt brave enough to try out, he took his time. He carved it onto his left temple, where hair would hide it, once it grew back. It gave him a pretty rough headache, too. Wakane. Wisdom. Pondering. Intelligence. Reflection. Beyond the human mind. He carved his right temple now. The headache got much worse. He felt that it would be safer not to add anything when it came to his mind. For some stupid reason, he continued. Inari. Life force. Growth. Fertility. Fertility? His head was pounding. Shit. What was it again? Something about foxes? I can't think. Too late. He couldn't afford to mess it up. He carved it just under the seal that used to host the Ninetales. He activated it. In retrospect, that had been dumb. He would not realize it right away, but later on, when he actually had to deal with its consequences on a daily basis. He'd curse his past self for not having been a little more patient. Oh, and Orochimaru, too. But this was a daily thing, anyway. When he awoke, despite the pounding headache, his thoughts were clearer than ever. Some of the distractions, the intrusive thoughts, worries, had just faded away, for lack of a better term. Some hazy memories sharpened, as well. Some wanted, some less so. He was sick again, so he took the time he spent in his bed to sort through them. He managed to practice some chakra sensing after just 2 days of rest, this time. His chakra levels had been more noticeably affected this time. Overall, he estimated he'd lost about a quarter of his maximum capacity with all the seals he had carved into his flesh. It would take some time before he was back at full strength, then. The scars were not so visible, in the end, being mostly covered by the ink he had used to draw the supporting symbols. Over the next 2 months, in which he didn't dare continue carving seals into his body, he noticed he was growing. Fast. Very fast, even. Some people in Orochimaru's base did double takes when they saw him again after a long period. When he had come here, just a few months ago, he had been 1 meter 52. A bit on the lower side, but nothing to really worry about. Now, a few months shy of 14, he had trouble counting, considering the time displacement thing. He was standing at 1 meter 65. Which meant he was a bit taller than Karen, now. It was a relief, somehow. He was also filling out pretty nicely. The combination of Uzumaki genetics, a Biju's chakra in your belly, and a few seals to speed up your growth were truly a sight to behold. He weighed around 70 kilos, by now, and he was still growing. This is likely going to be the last set of seals I'm going to be carving. I don't want to risk more. As you wish. Orochimaru nodded, but didn't push. Fujin. Wind god. Tempests. Typhoons. Protection. Battle. Trickster. Vitality. It went under his left collarbone. This one hurt when it activated. Naruto had to wait a half hour before resuming. Raging Thunder God. Lightning. Thunder. Storms. Aggression. Fierceness. Stamina. He tried not to think too hard on what the other symbols would likely bring him. He could not afford it. Right collarbone. It activated. Something was wrong. He could feel it. The seals were opposing each other's inner workings. They had expected this to happen. He gasped, motioned for Orochimaru to let him be. He would need to finish this set right away, otherwise. No need to think about it now. He drew the last seals with a shaky hand. Cannon. Goddess of Mercy. Harmony. Fertility. Fearlessness. Balance. Healing. He carved her symbol along his spine, under Koho. He felt her pull. Fujin and Raijin settled enough for him to feel he was not going to die. Still, everything ached. He asked for water but passed out before he was able to drink any. Later on, when Karen comes to his room to bring him some food, she doesn't understand why he insists she doesn't come too close. He looks so nervous red in the face, too, that she doesn't insist, though. Orochimaru-sensei, I think we may have a problem on our hands. What is it? He asked, golden eyes curious. The fertility symbols. I thought it was just puberty at first, but... I think we may have used too many of them. Naruto said, not meeting his eyes. It was the best way to speed up your growth, when combined with the others. Yes, I understand this. Naruto said, frustrated. But they also do weird things too, my thoughts. I keep getting distracted. Oh. I see. Orochimaru said, amused. Why don't you find yourself a nice girlfriend or two, then? Naruto reddened and left huffing. He made it sound so easy. Maybe Orochimaru had a point. Despite feeling himself improve at a much faster rate, and despite his increased mental acuity, it was hard for him to focus, sometimes. Same thing went for his clones, and he knew he was missing out on some productive hours. Simply put, he was a growing boy. And there were no girls his age in camp. What kind of woman would be interested in a 14-year-old? He shuddered to think of it. To Naruto's surprise, wind came to him a bit easier in the weeks after. Before long, he was able to summon it to slow down his fall or enhance his throws. It also seemed to work better with blunt weapons than lightning. He could use it to make each attack a bit faster, and thus, stronger. This morning, Orochimaru motioned for him to stop. Why do you insist on using a staff, when you seem to be better with a sword? He asked. Naruto doesn't answer right away, a bit hesitant. Ah. I see. Orochimaru says, looking serious. Your aversion to killing. Mercy, then. What of it? Naruto asks, defensive. Nothing wrong about it per se. The man calms him down. But there's something here you're ignoring. Mercy is a luxury only the strong can afford. Orochimaru says, wistful. What do you mean? I've been a shinobi for around 50 years. I know how unusual that is. Most of us tend to die well before that. It was true. The average life expectancy for a shinobi was at around 27. Not including the permanently disabled veterans. Naruto forced himself not to wonder about Sakura's whereabouts. What is your point? Naruto asked. What do you think is the main reason I got there? Naruto thought about it. Talent and diligence. Was this the answer he was looking for? Orochimaru snorted. Without wanting to brag, I know I'm a prodigy. But that's not it. There have been 24 of people with just as much, or even more innate talent than me born in Konoha after me. Out of all of them, Namikaze had been the most prodigious. Born to a civilian family, no particular bloodline and still. Naruto let him continue. Out of all of them, do you know how many are alive now? He hesitated. Orochimaru finished. 3. Hey, take Kakashi, Uchiha Itachi and Shisui. They're brothers, we'll have to see about, in the future. Only 3. The rest died, yes. Most of them, on the battlefield. It's not that I was more talented than them. It's not that I was working much harder than them, either. It's not even because Sarutobi-sensei nurtured our talents, even though this is also what allowed us to at least grow through a period of almost constant warfare. He could not protect us from everything, no matter how strong he had been. Naruto didn't like where this was going. I won't hide it from you, the biggest reason I'm still here, is simple, dumb luck. He shrugged. He had accepted his place in a seemingly random, seemingly cruel universe. The second reason is that I don't hesitate to force my luck. I put all the chances on my side, no matter what it takes. Killing, experimenting, cheating. You name it. Sarutobi-sensei did not always approve. It had been the major reason he had been passed over for the role of Hokage in favor of Minato, back when he still cared about it. He had been bitter at the time. Now he saw it as the best choice Sarutobi had made, both for them and the village. The fact that Minato had died after less than 5 years on the job was just more proof that he would not have been able to make the necessary sacrifices. He continued. Jiraiya and Tsunade used to be too merciful, too. They've learned better. Despite their aversion to killing, they realized the same thing I did. When all 3 of our lives were put at risk because of the mercy they extended to people they shouldn't have. Orochimaru looked wistful. People you spare will come back again. If not the next day, then the next week. If not next week, then in the next war. And in our world, there will always be conflict. It doesn't mean killing indiscriminately is right. No. It doesn't. But what happens when someone you spared kills one of your allies? Your friends. Gaara would definitely have. Well. Because that is what will happen in a war. Mercy is more likely to see your friends dead. Me and my teammates long decided that we'd rather bloody our hands instead. Naruto said nothing. I'm not saying you should kill every time you fight. Orochimaru's eyes hardened. But there are times you will need to. And some people you just can't afford to let live. I would suggest you prepare for this eventuality. Despite his feelings on the matter, Naruto could not deny the man's words had an impact on him. He had always shied away from learning techniques more suited for murder. If a situation rose where he had to choose between killing again, or letting an ally die, were his morals worth the lives of the people he cared for? What was a man's life worth? Who was he to decide an IWA ninja's life needed to end because he was a threat? And who was that very same man, to do the same? He had a lot of soul-searching to do. Naruto wasn't sure what to make of it, but he started training with his bow and sword again. Orochimaru had a point. If the need rose at some point, well, he would need to be prepared. Why do you use this sword in particular? Orochimaru asked again. It seemed like the man was intent on making him question a lot of things. This was a sword the old man had given him long ago. I don't mean that there's anything wrong with it. It seems like a good quality one, even. So, why don't you use your summoned weapons? Orochimaru asked. Oh. Like the dagger I used to carve these seals into my skin. He repressed a little shiver at the memories. Exactly. Well, actually, he didn't know. It's only become possible for me to summon them at will very recently. Curiosity shone in Orochimaru's eyes. Elaborate. Well, the first few times it happened, we were in danger. Who is we? And what happened, exactly? Ah. The same calculating glint in his eyes. Could be good news, could be bad. Naruto focused on the memory. Since he had completed both memory seals, things were much clearer. Well, the first time, I was holding Sakura, a friend of mine, and that Uzumaki man was threatening us. I felt some sort of pull, maybe? Some link between us. Sasuke told me something like a gauntlet appeared around Sakura's hand, too. A gauntlet. He nodded. Something half physical. Same thing happened with Sasuke, on a later mission. The one where I got myself captured, actually. You summoned another gauntlet? Specify. No. It was a pair of swords this time. Orochimaru muttered to himself. Fascinating. I guess. So the weapon summoned depends on the person you link with. I never really thought about it. But, yes, I would say so. Could you summon the very same weapons right now? Let me try. Naruto focused. In a crack of lightning, a gauntlet appeared around his arm. Is this the one? Orochimaru asked. Naruto observed it carefully. No. I don't think so. Do it again, then. He pictured the gauntlet receding, and it faded away in a show of blue light. Maybe picturing the link itself would work better. Emotions and intent are connected often enough. His master supplied. He nodded. Sakura. Kind. Resilient. Smart. Nothing happened. Maybe that was too vague. He took a moment to think. He knew her better than this. She was strong-willed. Even after what had happened to her, she would not settle for less than what she wanted. Level-headed. Barring one specific situation where they were facing death for the first time, she always pulled through with good rational decisions. Caring. She was kind to everyone. But more than this, she liked helping. She was a hopeless romantic. He had seen her cry over the cheesiest romance novel ever. Of course, he had to read it too, after that. She was emotional. Because she was empathic. She was self-reliant. To some degree, he was not surprised she had left the village. She was Sakura. She would be fine. He felt the link. Somehow, he knew she was alive, somewhere. He hoped she would feel it too. Naruto pulled, then he pushed. The gauntlet appeared in a flash of light. Somehow, he knew this was a replica, and Sakura still held the original one. He also knew he could always summon his own, from now on. It was black and gold, and covered his forearm and half of his hand. Fascinating. The same gleam was back in Orochimaru's eyes. Orochimaru had known a few Uzumaki. He knew about their chains, a bloodline limit that appeared in some of them. Uzumaki Kushina had been one. Karen looked like she had the potential for them too. But this was not the Uzumaki technique. There was something of it in there. But it was too different. He wondered what had happened to Naruto for him to manifest such a strange technique. Ever since he had seen him summon a dagger for the first time, he had been curious. This gauntlet was not a weapon. It stopped before the fingers, had no blade or spikes. Armor, maybe? Something told him no. Now, manifesting physical tools had been an Uzumaki thing. Shaping chakra as weapons and shields that were both solid, and not. That was closer to the higher levels of Uchiha Dojutsu. This had something of both. It was not Namikaze's blood. It was not from Uzumaki Kushina either. Just what were they dealing with? Orochimaru enjoyed a good riddle. So, what does it do exactly? What is its use? Orochimaru repeated. Naruto stared. He had never thought of it. Orochimaru continued. The chains summoned by the Uzumaki had the ability to be controlled by their users. They were durable, could bind targets, and nullify their chakra. This worked even on Biju. Okay. And they were used for sealing, in a myriad of ways. Is this something similar, then? Orochimaru shrugged. I guess we'll have to try it out to find out. Chapter 27, The Songbird. Not the same thing as these chains you mentioned, then. Naruto admitted defeat. The summoned gauntlet definitely didn't nullify or absorb chakra. It could be used as protection, but a simple pair of plates would do the same job. What about its sealing ability? Orochimaru asked, still curious, despite his initial disappointment. There was likely something useful in there, they just had to dig. I don't think it has one. Can't use it to pull anything in, at least. What about the other way? It seems like I can put down some sort of mark. I'm not sure what it is for, but it feels like lightning chakra, some would. Show me. Naruto did. He put a hand on the ground, focused his chakra and a golden mark appeared. Orochimaru took a look. It was not any kind of sealing language he knew. He called for Karen. Lightning. No, this feels closer to thunder than lightning. Karen said. Naruto frowned. Is there a difference? It's more of a nuance. She shrugged. Is this a seal, then? That's the thing. We're not sure. Naruto answered. Let me take a closer look. She whistled a soft tune while she did. Orochimaru asked him. What about the other one you summoned before? Any particularity? The weapon I made for Sasuke could conduct and emit chakra. He hesitated, then. Both of the blades, I think. So their power depends on the person you create a link with, then. But when Naruto summoned their replicas, earlier this morning, they only conducted chakra as much as a regular pair of chakra-conductive swords. Not much compared to the original. He said as much to Orochimaru. Then it stands to reason that the copies you can summon have a similar ability, but either lesser, or simply different, only time will tell. Maybe that's it. We'll have to do more extensive testing, then. I think I got it. Karen said, interrupting them. This has the same feeling as a location seal. Like the ones used for direction. Yes, exactly. The ones without a range limit. The Snake Sage finished. Orochimaru had tried to understand the second and fourth Hokage space-time jutsu for months, before putting it aside. As far as he understood, their techniques were based on a similar seal, as there was no distance limit. If he understood it right, if then the only factor was the user's sensing ability. As long as you could locate the tag, you could jump there. This was confirmed by Naruto's failed use of it, making him leap from rain all the way to the land of hot springs, without being able to sense the tag that had been left there, or any tag at all. Naruto asked, his brow furrowing. So thunder, and location. Seems so. Karen smiled. I'm still not sure about its use. What do you think this could be? I don't know. Karen admitted. Maybe summoning a thunder strike where you put a mark. Try it. He did. Nothing happened. Maybe not. She said, looking sheepish. In the end, they didn't manage to figure out what this was for. Karen asked Naruto if it was possible for him to create more of the weapons. He tried to create a link with Orochimaru, who showed a bit of disappointment when nothing happened. He couldn't manage with Karen either, but he felt that he was closer, at least. Orochimaru said he would look into it later. He still was not done with Sujin's research, despite spending most of his time over it. They resumed training, instead. It was hellish. The same training ritual played out day after day. Naruto showed up to outdoor practice 2 hours after he met up with Karen. He endured a few hours of extreme pain. He went to eat. Then he went back for more, in the strange, expanded training room Orochimaru had built in what looked like a regular-size stone house from the outside. The room was way bigger than it should be, by a factor of 3 or 4. The walls absorbed most jutsu and techniques, which made it possible to train indoors in the first place. As for the afternoon training, it wasn't easy. He sometimes felt as if he were surfing on a wave of adrenaline for half the session. His legs felt as if they were strapped down with weight. His arms, he had trouble lifting. He dug deep within himself, taking more and more every day. Then he staggered back to his quarters and slumped into his bed, where he'd be lucky to be tired enough to avoid the dreams. When his teacher saw that his growth was exceeding his previsions, he pushed him even more. It wasn't long before Naruto reached a bit too deep, touching the ancient well of power he pretended was not here most days. That night, he passed out more than he went to sleep. Naruto blinked. His quarters were gone, and he was standing in the darkness. The air was heavy, and smelled of smoke. He was walking out of a building. Torches littered the path in front of him. He looked at his hands, noticing they looked different. More used, older, somehow. There were people there, wearing white robes. They bowed to him, foreheads touching the floor. He saw himself ignore them, walking without a sound. He reached another man, who bowed as well, not as low. "The preparations are over, my lord," he said. "Very well." Naruto felt himself nod. "Then we shall depart in an hour. My brother shall breathe his last tonight." He walked away from them, reaching a large dark room. His left hand moved and a flame surged. 3 candles were lit. Naruto saw himself approach the mirror. He took a look. Long, curly brown hair fell over his back. Red eyes stared back, 3 tomo swirling in them lazily. But it was the expression that took him by surprise. He had seen the very same on a different face, most mornings. His own. Without knowing where the knowledge came from, he knew who he was. No, who the man was. The first son of the first son. Former heir to the Sage of 6 Paths. In time, he would take the world. Something changed in his eyes. The tomo swirled together, forming a different shape altogether. His eyes widened, a mad shine into them, and the face he was seeing shifted into amusement. "I see you, little Uzumaki!" Naruto screamed. The nightmare stopped. He was still screaming when he woke up, drenched in sweat. Somebody came. The door opened, and Orochimaru stood there, an inscrutable emotion on his face. "I think it's time you tell me what it is that is going on, exactly." He followed Orochimaru to the highest platform. The man waited for him to start. "I don't think these are regular nightmares." "Not anymore," he said. Orochimaru nodded. "Karen has told me that there was a strange chakra coming from your rooms, on some nights. I assume today is one of these nights." "Most likely. I seem to have a different chakra within me. I only became fully aware of it recently, when I learned how to sense chakra. I thought it was the 9 tails, at first." "So it's not, then?" "No." Naruto gripped the railing. "I think it's the source of these strange weapon abilities." "No, not all of it. But I think they are so different from the Uzumaki bloodline because of his presence." "His? Do you know who this chakra belongs to?" Naruto breathed. "Yes. I thought he only existed in legends. A man that's been dead for long, too. But I don't think this is entirely true, either. I know who he is, at least." Orochimaru stared at him, eyes squinted. "Who is he?" "Otsutsuki Indra." Orochimaru said nothing, folding his arms. He sighed. "So, some legends are real. I had a feeling, what with Nagato and his eyes." "Can you tell me more?" Naruto asked, desperate for something to. "Just something. Legends says the Sage of 6 Paths, the ancestor of shinobi, and the founder of what became ninjutsu, had 2 sons. Knowing he could not achieve true peace in his lifetime, he entrusted his dream to both of them." Orochimaru paused. "Well, he ended choosing only one. Indra, the prodigious elder brother, was passed over, in favor of Ashura, the younger one. I've heard this name before." The voice. "Indra called Sasuke by that name." "Uchiha Sasuke, then? How peculiar. Why is that?" "The Senju and Uzumaki clans are said to be descendants of Ashura. And the Uchiha, from Indra. It seems as though things have gotten mixed up, somewhere. No matter. According to the legend, Indra never accepted being passed over. Overcome by bitterness, he swore to fight a war against Ashura that would last through the ages. Do you think it is true?" That he could be speaking to me somehow. As true as your dreams, I would assume. The only way to know for sure would be trying to communicate with him. It was easier said than done. No matter how much he tried to reach for the ancient chakra, nothing seemed to happen. The dreams had stopped, too. Months and months passed. Knowing what the dreams had been about turned out to be a huge relief, somehow. From then on, he was able to stop thinking about them as much. A legend told him there was a chance that some dead guy's chakra was coursing through his vein. Great. He'd deal with him the day he would show his face. That was how he dealt with things. In the meantime, he still had to get up and go after it every single morning. This was more concrete. His tolerance for punishment rose and rose, until even Orochimaru seemed surprised. 6 in the morning became 5. 5 become 4 in the morning. It sometimes meant running through the forest without using his chakra before his lesson with Karen. Sometimes it was more speed drill carrying weights up and down the local hills. Sometimes it was more muscle training, becoming stronger with each passing day. Pull UPS, push UPS, squats, and a myriad of variants. Overtraining? Maybe at first. Orochimaru's training was rigorous, but he knew what he was doing. There was no time for comfort, no settling for mediocrity. Naruto adapted. His body was changing, and not just on a superficial level. Things he had assumed to be impossible were now within reach. He learned wind jutsu. He learned lightning jutsu. He practiced with the bow. He practiced with the sword. He had so many clones out at any given moment he couldn't tell them when he had made them in the first place. Or when they were transformed, that they were him. He became familiar with some of the residents of Orochimaru's little haven. Most of them were only around from time to time, being busy with the outside world. Karen and Anko were exceptions, working directly with Orochimaru. Many were not too interested in making acquaintances. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked the foul-mouthed girl he had seen around, when he came, what felt long ago. "Yeah. I mind. Go find somewhere else to eat, fuckhead." Orochimaru-sensei said you were his first student. "Hell yeah, I was. The man's got his hands full with you now, and all. I'm still the best, though," Anko answered, her feet on the table. "Care to teach me a few tricks, student to student?" "Bet. Watch, I wanna know." She grinned. "I'll take anything you think might be interesting, really." "Nah, you got something specific in mind. Tell me. How do I flirt?" She let out a cackle. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked the foul-mouthed girl again. She was playing music, and it had been too long since he had. It got him curious. "Yeah. I'm practicing the flute." "Go away, kid. You play the flute. The fuck does it look like I'm doing?" "Shoo." "Huh? Didn't I see you sitting in the library, 5 minutes ago?" a huge teenager with orange hair asked. "I'm just really fast." The guy looked at Naruto, doubtful. Naruto laughed. "Sorry, stupid joke an old man used to play on me. It was likely a clone. I'm Naruto. Call me Yugo, then." The giant said, smiled, extending his hand. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked again, 3 days later. Holy shit. How many times? She rolled her eyes, and then saw what he was carrying. "You play the koto." "The fuck does it look like?" he answered with a stupid smile. She snorted a laugh. "Okay, smartass. Let's hear it." The redhead, it was closer to Pink, from up close, actually listened to him play, without saying anything. "Yeah, maybe you play. Too bad it sounds like shit. I'm out of practice. Help me out." He tried with a smile. "Is this a cheesy pickup line? Do you want it to be?" She snorted. "You been hanging out with that fucktard Sakon or what? Try this shit again and I'll rip your little balls off." "Sure thing. So are we going to play music or what?" "Damn, so you were serious then?" "Yeah. Well, fuck it then. Let's play some music." "Did somebody pay for musicians?" Shimizu Naoki asked, confused, a few days later. "Nah, Apparently Orochimaru's latest apprentice knows a few songs, though. His drinking companion nodded. True to his words, near the campfire, the blonde teenager, though he was starting to really look more like a young adult, strangely enough was sitting next to. Is this Teiwa? Seems so. I was pretty shocked, too. She can be difficult. Naoki snorted. That was a bit of an understatement. Then he paused. He knew that song. His friend asked him what this was about. Ah, it's nothing. Just a bit nostalgic, is all. It's something from where I'm from. The Kemp stilled a bit, and the blonde continued to play, his fingers strumming the koto's strings softly. The music came out of him, just like singing. The girl, Teiwa, started playing as well, her flute, like a second voice. On the choruses, the koto and the flute mixed. Naoki was only dimly aware of the audience, or of the musicians themselves. The only thing he could think about was growing up in the north of the Land of Fire, just him and his mother. He could remember the taste of the sweet rice she served so often. Oh, how he had complained, at times. Now, he'd give anything to taste it again. A little tear rolled down his face and he wiped it before his friend could see it. That had been years ago. A different life. Still, he clapped hard when their impromptu performance was over. The applause roared, like thunder. I don't think this is such a great idea, Teiwa-san. Naruto said, a couple hours later. She snorted. Are you always this formal with people you are not too familiar with? I guess so. I never really thought about it. He definitely was. Well, if you don't want to drink, I guess that's more for me, then. She took a big gulp of the bottle of sake. You know what, let me have some. With how high his metabolism seemed to be these days, chances were he would purge the alcohol quickly enough. Ugh. So you're not that much of a fucking square, then? What would poor Orochimaru-sensei think? Not much, I presume. His former teammates were pretty big on the bottle, apparently. According to him. He took a huge gulp, like she had. Guh. This burns. He wanted to scrape his tongue. His throat felt as though it were on fire. Well, it's sake. What did you expect? She rolled her eyes. How should I know? I never drank before. Really? Fucking square. How old are you even? You guess. She thought, looking him over. I would say 18, maybe 17. So a bit younger than me. He raised an eyebrow. Physically speaking, that was probably where he was. Apparently, he really would have been a late bloomer, growing taller only late he still was. Maybe some Uzumaki quirk. When did he come here again? Mentally, with all his clones running around, living parallel lives since he had been 12 or so. It was hard for him to say. Likely around her age. She continued. But I saw you when you first came, you looked much, much younger. What the fuck was that about, by the way? I don't think people are supposed to grow this much in such a short amount of time. Maybe I'm just a late bloomer. Teiwa snorted. Right. They lapsed into comfortable silence. You played pretty well down there. Decent, I mean. She said. So did you. He nodded, starting to feel a bit lightheaded from the alcohol. Hey, I was thinking. Yeah. Couldn't you use your clone thing to be like a one-man band or something? I guess. I can only play the koto though. Well, learn some other shit. It would take a while. Not necessarily. There's always, she perked up. Wait. I got a joke for you. All right? Go ahead. She snorted a laugh, amused herself. What do you call someone who likes getting drunk and hanging around musicians? He thought. No answer came. Looking at her face, all puffed up and red, trying to contain her laughter was making him start to laugh too. A drummer. She finished, before starting to cackle. She cracked up at her own joke, it was a real belly laugh. He laughed too, despite himself. They spent the night talking about random topics, from music to future plans. You're from Konoha? She asked, in surprise. Yeah. Though I don't particularly want this info to get back at them, he said, wryly. She smirked. I won't tell if you won't. I ran away from a town south of the land of rice. Parents wanted to marry me off to some shitty noble. He winced. It's a long time ago already. We've all got our own shit, anyway. She smiled. She really was cute, he thought. I think the sun's rising. Maybe we should go to bed, he said, 1 minute later. Sunrises truly were nice in the land of rice. The sky turned blue at first. Then red and purple patches would appear. The orange glow would come after, until everything was painted gold. Taewya watched the sunrise for a while, and seemed to think about something. The next instant, she was pressing her lips against his own. Naruto seemed to short-circuit. Yeah. Maybe we should. She looked at him straight. He wasn't very experienced in these matters, but even he could understand an invitation this blunt. Damn. So this is really happening, then? You really are shy, then? She asked. I don't think so. He shrugged, trying to look casual. I'm a virgin, though. For real. She said, eyebrows rising. How? Never had sex, I mean. I get that. She smacked his chest. But why? You are pretty good looking. At his cheesy grin, she added, for a leaf ninja, I mean. He pretended to frown. Take the lead, then. Mistress. She knew he was joking. Still, her imagination and the alcohol helping, she felt herself react. There was something about the idea of teaching such an eager volunteer. And she hadn't been lying, he was pretty easy on the eyes, if a bit young-looking. Well, if you insist, she just said, instead, before kissing him. Take my clothes off. Naruto almost ripped her shirt off, and she laughed at his enthusiasm. He kissed her, somewhat clumsily. It wasn't bad, though, she felt. She bit back a chuckle as she felt him struggle with her bra. She looked pretty tired, Naruto thought, as she was riding him, a while later. It seemed she had forgotten any pretense of teaching him anything. Not that he was complaining. Don't come anywhere near me with that. She moaned tiredly, dragging her sweaty body under the covers. I'd love to help you out, but I'm dead. Finished? Since she passed out right after, he thought she was probably telling the truth. The sun was high up in the sky, now. Maybe his stamina could be a bit of a problem, then. He'd have to find a way around that. The only thing he was thinking about, though. It seemed all the shit Kakashi had made him read actually had some decent advice in it. He muttered a silent thanks to the author, the gallant hermit, whoever he was. An Orochimaru. In his roundabout way, he may have been onto something when he told him to get laid. He fell asleep. At 10 in the morning, about an hour later, Karen knocked on his door. He woke up, staring blearily at the door, a light headache not too bad considering what they had drunk the day before, overall and lack of sleep contributing to his general incomprehension. The smell of the room hit Karen, who made a face. She took in Taewya, who was snoring, and his half-naked form. She didn't seem particularly impressed. "Was that?" "I think," she said, taking a second to fight some amusement. "You might have overslept. Get your clothes, we're going to practice. Now." "Ah. True." He had hoped that what little sleep he got would be enough. Now, as he steadied himself, he took a look at Karen, who looked half amused, half annoyed. It was going to be another long day, then. Chapter 28, Ghost Hand. "Taewya? Really? You sure are changing fast," Karen said once they had gotten started. "Oh, well. I suppose she is nice enough." Today's exercise was a new one. Karen would create mud balls that she would then throw at him. His eyes were closed. He was to use chakra sensing to locate their position, honing in on the energy that held the balls together. Then he'd dodge them. Thwack. Another mud ball hit him in the chest. Well, he was supposed to dodge them. Didn't mean he was able to. Thwack. Another caught him in the face. He felt the next one coming. He yelped, jumping over one that would have hit in the privates. Karen! Karen! What the fuck? It's training, she said in return. She did seem to take a bit too much pleasure in it, though. Orochimaru seemed to know everything that was happening around the base. So it was no wonder that he was already chuckling when he saw him coming. Well, it could also have been his long face, who knew? You surprise me sometimes, Naruto-kun. I aim to impress. He managed to snark. Oh. Orochimaru lifted an eyebrow, definitely amused now. Go on, then. As far as I remember, your silent walk technique is still shaky, at best. Naruto winced. He definitely couldn't make good use of it yet. It was a jutsu that was supposed to muffle the sound one's feet made. In his hands, it almost did the opposite, with the wind whistling and pushing things away. It was especially bad that day. Orochimaru was in an amused mood, so it could have gone worse, but still. He probably wouldn't drink again for a long time. It wasn't worth it, if this was the kind of decision that seemed like a good idea at the time. Like most days, he crawled back to his rooms, where clones were undoubtedly practicing as well. He passed Teiwa on the way. For a moment, he wondered what to say. Hello? Want to go eat something? Thanks. Would things be awkward? He didn't know her that much, but she was pretty nice to be around. She spared him the overthinking. Hey there, fucktard. She had a little smile on, though. Want to play some music? He smiled too. Sure. Once he stopped worrying about things changing between them, he found that he was feeling pretty great, actually. Life in the camp was pretty nice. It felt like home, even. He had a few friends, and probably the best teacher he could find for his goals, one that had the skills and willingness to bend the rules to get him there. The occasional meeting with Teiwa was a nice bonus, of course. He found out that he could focus again, now. 2 weeks later, Orochimaru surprised him by announcing he would be leaving for the mountain's graveyard. Why, though? There is nothing in that region besides a few mining towns, isn't there? I have reason to believe this could help you with your little ancestor problem. Call it a hunch. Orochimaru said simply. Did you make any progress on that front? No, not really. He admitted. Seemed like he was going to follow his teacher's gut feeling. Once more. Orochimaru knew he had won. Then make your preparations, and be on your way. Find the Otsutsuki ruins there and try to see if that works. Consider this part of your training. How is this training? At some point, you're going to have to get back to the outside world. You'll need to keep your identity under wraps. Do you think I am ready? For this much, yes. Still, you will go with Anko. In case any real trouble arises, the kind that even she could not handle, she knows how to reverse summon me there. I see. Thank you. He hesitated. May I ask for Karen to join us? Do as you wish. So you didn't even consider taking me with you, then, fucktard? Teiwa asked, getting in his face. I'm kidding. She laughed. Damn, you're still such a fucking square. He sighed. Yeah, well. I'm going tomorrow anyway. She nodded. All right. Want to give me a proper goodbye? He gave her his best roguish grin. What they had was very casual. Pretty nice, too. Damn, who died and made you boss? Still, she followed him to his quarters. When he arrived the next morning, only Anko was ready. You've got a hickey on your neck. She grinned. Not that much of a kid anymore, then. Must be my advice. He pulled his collar higher and did his best to ignore her teasing. Karen arrived later. Naruto stared. She was wearing body armor over standard infantry clothing, complete with arm guards and bandages around her ankles. You know this is just a standard journey, right? Naruto asked. We're just supposed to find some ruins. Yeah. Right. I'm not taking any chances. Half your missions seem to turn out more complicated than expected. Karen huffed. Anko snorted a laugh. Naruto gave Karen the side eye. Sorry to drag you into this, by the way, Orochimaru. Sensei. Seems to think this is really important. And I couldn't think of anyone other than you. He smiled. Karen put her nose up in the air. And don't you forget it. Mountain's graveyard was an unclaimed territory standing between the land of waterfalls and the land of rice. It was a land of dense forests, where the bones of gigantic creatures were found all over. Not many people ventured there, of course. Call it either superstition, or the remnants of some older human instincts, screaming to stay away from here at all costs. The trio set up camp for the night at the edge of the land of rice, after covering a lot of distance during the day. A few clones stayed out in the field for the night, keeping watch for them. His stamina had grown enough that maintaining clones that stood still was child's play to him, now. The next morning, they crossed the border into the mountain's graveyard. Ninja rarely traveled through here. It was a land of no rules, besides local law, since there was no central government. The trees were shaped in a way that was very different from those in the land of fire, Naruto noticed. It seemed they had a tendency to spiral out of control, growing crooked and busy. Their branches looked withered, and brittle at the same time. Traversal was slow, since they had to stay on the ground most of the time. Another thing was there were almost no remains of human settlements. The first town they came across was a mining town, near the more rocky parts of the country. They settled in an inn there for the evening. The town was in a pretty bad state, and half of it was basically in ruins. The other half was just desolate, and people had wary looks on their faces. Karen did a cursory scan of the surrounding area, and concluded there was no threat, as far as shinobi were concerned. Anko nodded, heading out on her own. She waved at them, telling them she'd find them if there was trouble. They shared a look before heading out on their own. They would split and ask for information about any Atsutsuki. Mind if I sit here? Karen asked in overly shy tones. This was one of the 3 bars of the town. Gathering information was a subtle art, one that she was well versed in. She would have to slowly thread the needle, and ask about what she was actually curious about in a way that would make it seem as if this was just a natural evolution of the conversation. The man grumbled a vague answer, then turned around. He did a double take at the beautiful red head. No. No. Not at all. Thanks. She smiled. I'm just passing through this country, I have to meet my brother in the land of rice. Really? Are you traveling on your own? In here? She laughed playfully. No. Of course not. I have found 2 strong shinobi to protect me. Ah. I see. He nodded. This is good. You never know what kind of things you are going to find around here. It can get very dangerous. Dangerous. She made a show of widening her eyes. Is there something we should keep an eye on? Well, he hesitated. There is a rumor that the mercenary, Ghost Hand, has been spotted around here, just a few days ago. Ghost Hand. She put a hand over her mouth, looking scared. Yes. He leaned forward, looking and spoke in hushed tones. Rumor has it the red armor he wears was originally white. Karen held back a snort. This was obviously an urban tale. What kind of mercenary would wear white armor? Oh my, she tried to look as earnest as she could. Thank you for warning me, kind sir. Is there anything else I should know? Well. In another bar, Naruto sat down at the counter. The man gave him a brief look, nodded, and went back to his drink. Naruto spoke. You know where some of the Atsutsuki ruins thing are? The man's eyebrow rose a bit. Sure. Don't know why anyone would be interested in this old shit, though. Here's how to get there. Well, that was easy enough. Night had barely fallen. Apparently, there was one old temple that was supposed to have been used by people to worship the ancient clan, just 5 kilometers north. He hesitated. It was still early. Waiting until morning, only to find out this was nothing of interest, would prove frustrating. He was sure Anko and Karen had found some useful information of their own, so he might as well get a head start. Also, he had a few mobility techniques he wouldn't be able to use if they were traveling with 3 people. He looked around. What was the clearest place here? There was one building that was taller than the rest, and it would do perfectly. He walked up the side of it, until he was standing on its rooftop. The stars shone in the night sky. The North Star was easy enough to find for any leaf ninja. North should be there, then. He channeled wind chakra through his body to make himself a little bit lighter. Not too much, as he would need to be able to focus on the next step. While keeping the wind chakra coursing, he took a deep breath. This was something he had only been able to manage a few months after carving the Fujin and Raijin symbols into his body. Lightning crackled around his legs. It was a strange thing, keeping two elements running at the same time. A very conflicted sort of feeling. It took some compartmentalization. He opened his eyes. Naruto squatted down, flexing his quadriceps. He pushed off the floor, managing not to damage it. He leaped toward the sky like a cannonball. It was exhilarating, this feeling of shooting off, unconstrained by gravity for a moment. Then it reasserted itself slowly, as he reached the apex of his jump. He smiled, held the ram seal and transformed into an eagle. In this form, it would be easy to glide down until he reached his destination. His sharper eyesight would also help, of course. Karen felt Naruto leave town at very high speed. Oh, this stupid mother. She excused herself, and left the man in the bar, thanking him for his time. He smiled and raised his glass at her. Surprisingly enough, the building was mostly intact. Well, besides the roof, which had crumbled ago. Naruto, despite not being half the sensor Karen was, yet could sense some trace of a very old chakra. It had the same feeling as the one he had felt within himself. And strangely enough, it reminded him of the Nine Tails, as well. There were a couple snakes, large ones at that. But they seemed to have some degree of consciousness, as once they took a whiff of his smell, they just left him alone. Is this something related to Orochimaru? It was hard to tell what the man was actually doing or planning, most days. He didn't exclude the snake sage having given him some sort of immunity against snakes, even though he hadn't made him sign the contract yet. Considering the number of times he had drawn his blood, he could just as easily have slipped him something. He sighed. He wasn't even sure why he still trusted the man. Some would. Well. There's nothing here besides that altar. Might as well try to meditate and reach for it. He sat down in full lotus and did so. Nothing really happened. He sank deeper into the trance, just keeping enough spatial awareness to feel out for any possible threat. Naruto still wasn't sure if this was a sensor ability, or something the Nine Tails had left to him, but there was no denying it was useful. Prodding at the leftover chakra was taking too long. Meditating had never been his favorite thing in the world. He felt a chakra he knew above him. Within him, maybe? No threat. Is this working? Is this some Satsuki ghost? A hand grabbed his shoulder, fingers pointing at his jugular. I finally found you. A gravelly voice said. Ghost Hand, the mercenary, kept their hand on the cultist. Any kind of sudden move, and they would summon a chakra blade, hopefully ending the man's life in one surgical cut. The man had the gall to look surprised, actually. He spoke, not seeming too worried. Who are you, then? A Satsuki. The ghost scoffed from behind their helmet. That's the best you could come with. The man moved, surprisingly fast, and in a crack of lighting, he was suddenly standing 2 meters away. The man turned around. No, man was pushing it, as he looked like a teenager, 18, maybe. He frowned. Look, I know you have no ill intentions, I can feel it dash. They rolled their eyes behind the helmet. What would he know? It had been a long day, so if the blonde wanted a fight, then a fight he would get. Okay, maybe you do, now. Have it your wow. The spectral hand had extended from their left side, and the man teenager had dodged it at the last moment, too surprised. He's fast, even without using his lightning release. What the hell was that? He asked in wonder. The man in the armor gave no answer, of course. Only Orochimaru cared enough about bragging during a fight to explain how his techniques worked. Naruto summoned a sword, not too unlike the one he had crafted for Sasuke. The man was wearing armor, and he was good enough not to kill anyone by accident. He weaved hand seals around the grip of his sword. He really should practice more one-handed seals, he knew, and channeled wind chakra. He was better at mid-range techniques with it than he was with lightning. Wind release, air slash. Sharp blades of wind surrounded the shorter man, aiming at dismantling his armor. He made a single seal. Dog, using one hand, only. Naruto raised an eyebrow. The man was good. Water style, water wall. The man spat water through an opening through his helmet, which rose around him, and shielded him from the wind blades. All right, then. Naruto weaved more signs while the man was distracted. This one took more chakra. Wind style, wind lance. A greenish, almost invisible horizontal arc appeared in front of him, soaring to his target. When he'd jump, he'd blitz with a lightning dash, and then he'd force him to submit. Except the armored man didn't jump. Naruto squinted his eyes, seeing something blue flash at his opponent's feet, before he simply disappeared. What? This was a teleportation technique. His chakra sensing ability had been on, and confirmed the man had simply disappeared, reappearing 15 meters away. There was a very slight chakra mark on the floor, almost invisible to the naked eye. Another mark was where the man had appeared again. Naruto jumped on top of the ruins, and saw him from afar. That's a nice trick. Care to share how this works? No answer. We can still stop this, you know. He tried again. The man in the helmet scoffed. He started weaving one-handed signs again. I wonder why he insists on these. Does he have no other choice? His chakra senses showed him an imprint of a figure with two arms, so what was this about? He dodged a high-pressured water jet that would likely have left a nice hole in his head. Well, okay then. Let's see about it. Naruto unsealed his favorite bow. He crafted an arrow from chakra, focusing on the link he had with Sasuke. A blade made out of conductive material shifted its shape until it became an arrow. He knocked it. Wind. Chakra surrounded him, and he focused it inside the arrow. Adding lightning would be overkill, and he wasn't confident enough in his ability to keep it stable until it reached. He let go. The arrow streaked through the sky, its green light illuminating the night. Fast. The man let go of whatever technique he was holding, in a rush to avoid the arrow. He disappeared again. There. In the background, the arrow exploded in a cyclone of wind blades, devastating part of the forest. He moved, appearing next to where the man had first used his technique, a blade pointing at his neck. Nice reflexes on him. The man had formed a sort of triangular blade out of pure chakra, and was holding it close to Naruto's gut. Now what the fuck are you guys doing? He heard Karen scream. Karen. Karen. Naruto looked at the masked man. He definitely had only one hand, in the end. He stared back, just as confused. Karen sighed. He went out of sight for 20 minutes and got himself in a fight right away. She saw both them look at each other, confused. She held back a laugh. You know him? They both said, before glaring at each other. Oh yeah, I shouldn't call him by his name. She hoped he had picked something already. She started talking to the person in the armor. Yeah. I came with him. He left town, so I followed. I recognized your chakra once I was in range, so I had to make sure you didn't kill each other. I see. The seal distorted voice said. The chakra blade faded away. After some hesitation, Naruto did too. Guess we're not fighting anymore, then? He asked. He threatened me first, though. Well, yes. He hesitated, focusing his sense on the person with more precision. She's a woman. Karen let out a long-suffering sigh. He could be so smart, yet so frustrating, sometimes. That's Sakura, I mean my friend Sakura, you numbskull. Wait. What? He didn't voice out his surprise. He wasn't supposed to know her. True to Karen's words, the person removed their helmet. Pink hair held in a ponytail fell as she shook her head. Green eye, scar. The expression was more severe, but there was no doubt who this was. Even the gauntlet that she was wearing was the one he had summoned years ago. His mind blanked over. She sighed. Her voice had changed too, and she sounded more confident than in his memories. Well. My bad, then. I got caught into something else. I'm Sakura, a wanderer. Who might you be? Ah, yeah, that. He went with the first natural answer. I am Indra. Karen slapped her forehead. Sakura squinted her good eye, frowning. Indra, huh? Are you sure you are not part of this Itsutsuki cult? Chapter 29, The Elder Son. So you both are from this Uzumaki clan, then? Karen glared at him, daring him to say anything. Yes, we are. This is Uzumaki Indra. We're pretty distantly related. Naruto didn't like lying to Sakura, and he got the feeling Karen didn't either, so they'd try to keep it as vague as possible. Sakura just nodded. I see. But more importantly, Karen adjusted her glasses. Where the hell have you been? Everybody in the village is super worried, yeah no. Sakura winced. Ah. That. Karen waited, arms folded. You didn't write or tell anyone. Even Ino. Sakura sighed. Yeah. Sorry. It's a lot of things, but the gist of it is that I took a chance to get out of the village. And here I am. Karen looked so unsatisfied by the answer that Sakura let out a small laugh. Look, I'll tell you. Later. She gave Naruto a side look. The meaning was clear. She didn't know or trust the newcomer, even if he was her family. Karen saw him put his best poker face, trying not to look as if he took it personally. She held back a laugh. Karen relaxed somewhat. Well, the least you could tell us is what you're doing here, then. Sure. Sakura nodded. I've gotten hired to take care of a little problem. A problem? Naruto asked. Like finding something? Yeah, sort of. Sakura smiled dryly. There are a few cultists I'm going to murder. Ah. Okay. He didn't know why he was this taken aback. Both of them were mercenaries, if in an apparently different way. Still, what he remembered of innocent Sakura and this more jaded version had him feeling conflicted. Well. It wasn't his business anyway. Care to tell us more? She looked at him. He stared back. Apparently, there are some people in this region who got involved in some sort of ritualistic murder. She ended up saying. Kidnapping and killing kids, all sorts of grimy things. A cult dedicated to the Itsutsuki, then? Karen asked. She hesitated. That's the part where it gets a bit confusing. My client is from the land of waterfalls, where some of them started doing the same. Rumors had it that they came from here, so I came to investigate. The only cult I heard about was this one, so I thought, Sakura sighed. Well, there doesn't seem to be any sort of Itsutsuki cult still going on. At least, not in the southern part of the country. This is the first time I see somebody in these ruins. She looked at Karen, with a half smile. Definitely didn't expect to meet an old friend, though. Karen smiled back. This was still Sakura, in the end, even if she was very different. So what are you going to do, now? Karen asked. You can come with us, we're looking for some ruins. Sakura laughed. Sounds nice. I can't come right away, though. There's another point of interest I need to check out before the sun comes up. Apparently these rituals take place during the night, so. Can't rest now. She gave them but mostly Karen an apologetic smile. She nodded. I understand. I'll try to track you in a few days, if you're still around here. There's a good chance I will. Are you a tracker now? Sakura asked. Once I feel someone's chakra, I will always recognize it. And if I focus on a specific one, my range is several dozen kilometers. Sakura's eyebrow rose to her hairline. She whistled. That's something. I'll count on you to find me, then dash. Karen took her into a big hug, to her surprise. Still, he hugged her back. Take care of yourself, Sakura. Of course. She nodded. Sakura gave a brief salute to Naruto. Indra-san. See you next time. Before you leave. Can I ask you something? What is this gauntlet you're wearing? She looked at him, hesitant. Him being with Karen must have been enough for her, in the end. This. She flexed her hand. I'm still not sure. Once, I kinda summoned it. I have no real explanation. It sure came in handy a few times, though. Does it do anything in particular? Naruto asked. Maybe he'd finally get some clue about his own, which he had baptized Thunder Gauntlet. In a very literal way. She squinted her eye. Maybe that had been too much. Sorry, but I don't feel like telling you yet. Naruto thought and went off his hunch. Is this how you teleport around? She stiffened. He nodded. That had been it. How do you? She sighed. Well. I guess the cat's out of the bag. Yes, that's how I move around. Between the marks you put. She definitely didn't like being quizzed. Something like this, yeah. And from the way you used it, I would assume you can only have a certain amount at the time. 2 was his guess. She glared at him. Look, if you really want to talk about this, maybe next time. Maybe. I'm going, now. Her tone was frosty. She left. On foot. He likely had been right, then. Karen looked at him strangely. What? He asked. I think you could have waited a bit more. No reason to antagonize her. He was ready to retort. Then realized she was right. Yeah. My bad. I got too curious. Anyway, let's get back before Anko uproots the whole town looking for us. Sure. Anko had been sleeping soundly, it turned out. Naruto was not very impressed, but well, if she trusted them enough to let them go, he was not about to do anything to change that. They fell asleep quickly. There was nothing holding them in the small town, so they left at sunrise. As they went closer to the north, Karen started to feel uneasy. What is it? Naruto asked, seeing her discomfort. I don't know. Something feels weird. Let's stop here, and make sure you're okay, then. Anko said. No. No need. It's nothing physical. Let's continue. She insisted, and so they went on. The feeling only worsened, the more they went. The land itself was becoming stranger and stranger, the sky of a strange color and birds that looked like they belonged to a different era altogether flying around, making squeaky noises. There were more of the gigantic corpses, and they were bigger, too. Karen shivered. There's something wrong with this region. Some weird feeling in the air. I can't explain it. Maybe there is something to the superstition, then. Naruto said. If you want to head back, give me the word and we'll leave right away. Anko said, uncharacteristically serious. There's a strong lingering chakra in the air. About 50 kilometers away. You can feel it from here? Naruto asked, surprised. This was way over her usual range. She continued, tight-lipped. There's nothing normal about this. What do you mean? Karen hesitated. It feels like tailed beast chakra. 9 tails, in particular. They were at the source of it in less than 2 hours. Are you sure it's in here? Anko asked, tapping 2 fingers on the rocky mountain in between them and the lingering chakra. Absolutely. It's in front, and down. Karen confirmed. Yeah. I think I can feel it too. There is something of the 9 tails, for sure. Anybody inside? Anko asked. Karen held a ram seal and focused. She let out a cry, stumbling back. Karen. Are you alright? Yes. Yes. There's no one alive in there. But there was something huge, at some point. Is it safe to go in? Naruto asked. Anko thought. She decided. Let's go, then. How will we get in? Naruto asked. No ground-eater seal would be enough, unless they had days. She bit her thumb and summoned a large snake with a rock-like pattern. Well, then. Get in. Anko motioned at the snake, who opened its mouth wide. Karen and Naruto looked at each other, hesitating. Anko was already inside the snake, so they followed her in. It sank into the rock as if it were water. I'm going to repress this memory, just so you know. Anko laughed. This is just the tunnel snake. It's not that bad, really, just takes a bit of getting used to. Karen preferred not to ask what would qualify as bad to her. They moved through the ground. The snake came to a halt a few instants later, and spit them out. It sat there, waiting for them to be done. They were standing in a cavern, where some sort of mostly rotten roots covered half the floor. Chakra residue was still in the air. Something of the Nine Tails had definitely been here. But a while ago, then. There was nothing useful here, and Naruto sagged in disappointment. His senses picked up something else. There stood a throne-like wooden chair in the middle of the room. To Naruto, it might as well have been a beacon. He got closer. It was saturated in chakra. One that he knew very well. Indra. It felt as though it was calling to him. He reached it and touched it. Everything in the room disappeared. He heard Karen scream something he couldn't hear. He was standing in a dark room. The same mirror as the one he had seen last time hung against the wall. It had been a real place, he was sure. He looked at his hands. They were his. So, you've come. Naruto's head whipped around. A man in his prime, dressed in fine clothes. He would have been handsome, if not for the oppressing power he let out, making it impossible to focus on anything else. His red and black eyes stared at Naruto directly. For a moment, they seemed to become openings to something else. Thunder, crashing with a deafening sound. Roaring flames. Naruto tried to escape. There was no way out. Is this another dream? He asked, trying to force himself to wake up. Dream. Is this what you think this is? The man asked, amused. Who are you? He knew exactly who he was. You know exactly who I am. He said, as though he were reading his thoughts. Atsutsuki Indra. Do not say that accursed name in front of me. The void opened once more behind his eyes. Naruto froze. I am Indra. The man said simply. His eyes met his own again. Are you to become mine then? Yours. Call it however you want to call it. In the end, you will be consumed. Just like the others. The man said, indifferent. Naruto stared, his teeth gritted. You are a dead man. Don't meddle with the living. Dead? Is that what you wish to believe? He stood up, amused. I live, yet again. He stepped closer to him, taller and stronger. I won't use your power. Naruto said, panting. My power is your power. Your power is my power. There is nothing you can do. You will become host to my will, whether you choose to fight, or not. He smiled, his eyes wide. I will take you. And once you die, I shall take the next one. Over and over again, until our war is settled for good. Their noses touched. Or until the end of time, whichever comes first. I won't let you do as you please. Indra laughed. Fool, I already am. Naruto fell back and found himself in the cavern, once more. He took a big shuddering breath. Karen held him, while Anko looked on, worriedly. I think we should get back. There's nothing else for us here. He managed. What was this about? Karen asked. I'll tell you once we're out of here. Please. They nodded and left. A man with the Sharingan swirled in the room, minutes after they were gone. His alarms had gone off. There was nothing of interest in this place anymore. They had moved everything to a more defensible shortly after having captured the Nine Tails, for obvious safety reasons. There were still traces of chakra in the air, and a few small pieces of snakeskin on the ground, that he found after inspecting the entire cavern. There was only one person who'd come here on purpose, using snakes. Orochimaru, then. Well, I guess it's about time we take care of loose ends. Chapter 30, The Snake Sage. I managed to speak with Indra. He finally said, once they were settled around a campfire. Karen let out a gasp. For real? I think he intends to possess me. Or corrupt me. I don't know. He says it's inevitable. He might be right. I don't feel any of his chakra within me anymore. It could already be part of me. Or I could be part of him. I don't know. Naruto, Karen said worriedly. This is bad. Anko said. I think I'll need to speak with Sensei, then. Naruto nodded. Maybe he has some answers. He always seems to know a bit too much. He let out a small laugh. Anko smiled. By the way, did you dash? She disappeared in a puff of smoke. What? Naruto asked, in confusion. Had she been a clone? Karen looked nervous. I think she has been reverse summoned. Find out if... What the fuck is happening? She gasped. Anko had appeared at base camp. Flames ravaged through it. There were several dead people, too, she noticed, including Yugo and Kazumi. She felt sadness and dread well up, but there would be no time for that. Orochimaru was here, his left arm bleeding. She rushed to him. Keep your eyes on them, Anko. He hissed, never looking at her. She followed his gaze. There were 3 men in nondescript black robes. Another was dead, lying at Orochimaru's feet. They're Akatsuki. He explained shortly. They came for me. Nagato won't come by himself, then. Orochimaru asked the last part loudly. The man with the mask said nothing. Of course you won't say anything. He needs to keep his hands clean, at least on the surface. Orochimaru chuckled. I have had enough of your meddling, snake. The man just said in answer. A fireball erupted from his mouth, and the man next to him used wind style to amplify it right away. The other one weaved a few hand seals, and the techniques seemed to combine into a reddish fire. Despite its new color, the air around it seemed to shimmer. Orochimaru gave a quick nod to Anko. They bit their thumb at the same time, before calling their technique together. Summoning, Triple Rashomon. 3 menacing gates appeared in between them and the flames. They stood behind, as the fireball blew through the first and second gates, only stopping at the last. The heat was still scorching. Orochimaru gave Anko a pained smile. Sorry for bringing you into this, little Anko. She gave him a bright smile, trying to look confident. Isn't this what apprentices are for? He chuckled. Maybe. Orochimaru summoned the sword of Kusanagi, tossing it at Anko, who caught it before leaping to the air, still under the cover of the gates. Cover me a second, will you? He asked. She summoned Manda, who hissed at the world. Ah. His tongue tasted the air. You finally call me again. Orochimaru. I was the one who called you. Anko declared. You? The disciple. How dare you? I have a few worthy sacrifices for you. 3 measly humans. He tasted the air again. An Uchiha, Hashio, and Kiso, too. Will this be enough for you, Manda-sama? Certainly not. Prepare sacrifices for the next time, wench. It shall be done. She just wouldn't summon him again. How she hated dealing with the snake. Manda chuckled, leaping mouth wide open towards the 3 Akatsuki, who had to leap away to dodge him. He dug into the mountain in the same move, twirling his gigantic body to come back from underground. Toby observed the gigantic snake. There was nothing it could do to him, in truth, but the same thing could not be said for his allies. S-rank missing ninja were a rarity, and those whose loyalty could be either bought or subverted were even more of an oddity. Which meant he would have to keep them from dying. The snake sage was dangerous. The dead Yuki had been proof enough. His ice bloodline did nothing to prevent Orochimaru's deadly poisons from suffocating him. The snake was moving again, but Anko was gone. Toby's Sharinon saw the attack coming. She appeared behind him in a whirl of motion, the sword of Kusanagi going right through his chest. Actually going through, without causing any damage. Anko, unbalanced, fell forward in surprise. He let her fall through him, smashing into her back with a chakra-enhanced kick. Ah, a last-minute replacement. The Anko in front of him melted into a dozen snakes. The real one appeared above him, releasing a great inferno. She looked pretty confident, he thought. Toby let himself stroll through the flames, unharmed. More snakes erupted from the ground. They passed through him. Now he saw through her. The reason she was so confident was because she was not trying to kill him. She was stalling. But for what? His teammates were taking care of Orochimaru. He was Kisu Akane flying through a building. Orochimaru followed her. Ah. This might be a problem. Tobi's eyes could easily see the scaly patterns on Orochimaru's face, as well as the two horns jutting from his head. The Sage Mode enhanced wind jutsu that followed tore through the mountain. Anko was upon him again, flowing through the motions of the snake school. She was keeping him at a distance from which he couldn't grab her without exposing himself. He realized that while she hadn't figured the exact limits of his ability, she knew he couldn't attack and defend at the same time, not at this range. And she was making sure not to look him in the eye, of course. Tobi sighed. Anko apparently had become strong since the academy. She would be more than a match for either of his teammates, so it was a good thing that she was fighting him, instead. But if he left Orochimaru alone with them, there was no guarantee they would survive. Mando was keeping them busy enough as it was, the Hashio man could barely keep up. He dropped a pair of explosive tags, fading his body through the explosion. Anko had to leap away. The fire-tracking bomb jutsu he released after her forced her to shield herself. He teleported behind Orochimaru, as he was about to deal a killing blow with a wind blade to the Kisu woman. Being in Sage Mode, he felt him come and dodged the strike that would have taken his neck. The Snake Sage didn't say a word. He released the wind blade at Tobi, forcing him to dematerialize. He then attacked with a gentle palm strike, the instant he had to release the Kamui. Tobi dodged, and Orochimaru's hand missed his face by only an inch. The wave of natural energy that smashed into his mask didn't. Guh. He forgot about this part. Orochimaru was already weaving the signs for a partial body expansion technique, intending to smash Hashio with his fist. Tobi appeared there in a vortex, carrying him out. In the meantime, Orochimaru had created 4 clones. Without more than a single seal each, they spat a combined wave of fire, wind, and lightning at him. The resulting combination was kept up for a while, forcing him to stay intangible for longer than he would prefer. It was eating through his chakra. Further away, he could see Anko taking on Kisu and gaining the upper hand. Another Orochimaru he hadn't seen turned the floor under him to flammable mud. That was Jiraiya's technique, he recognized. He had to allow himself to catch fire to use his teleportation technique. You are as much of a pest as ever. Tobi grunted, ripping away his burned cloak from his singed arm. Orochimaru just gave him a dry smile. Anko appeared at his side. Kisu and Hashio were still good to go. He motioned to them to move on to their alternate formation. First, he would have to get rid of the disciple, so that they could focus on Orochimaru, who was the real threat. Kisu's combination bloodline should allow them to do this easily enough. He folded his arms, and started talking, winning his allies a bit more time to catch their breath. You can't win against me, Orochimaru. None of your prized jutsu can reach me. To his surprise and confusion, Orochimaru's Sage Mode faded away. That is the truth, yes. Unfortunately, I wasn't trying to win, Orochimaru said. The survivors escaped. We shall meet again. He likely wouldn't have waited for them if he had been at a real risk, Tobi knew. Tobi spoke. You wretched. Orochimaru chuckled, as he and Anko were reverse summoned away. Tobi cursed. They were back to square zero. They had known about Orochimaru's particular location for a month now, but it wasn't until the intrusion in Madara's former hideout that he had decided to do something about him. Now he would have to find him again. And the snake could be very elusive. Orochimaru and Anko appeared in Ryokai Cave. He thanked the summoner snake. This had been one of his contingency plans. Whenever he summoned one specific snake, before sending him back right away, that was a signal to revere summon him. He had the same code in place with a different snake that stood for reverse summoning him and Anko. It definitely had come in handy. Orochimaru allowed himself a quick thought for the people who had died. Then he moved on. Behind him, Anko let out a frustrated scream. They had an apprentice to find. What should we do? Karen asked, panicked. Naruto thought hard. If Anko's been summoned, it must have been an emergency. Orochimaru-sama never does this if it's not important. Karen continued. Do we even know if it's Orochimaru? Couldn't it have been the snakes themselves? Karen paused to think. Now that you mention it. Yeah. It could have been. Do you think we should go back to the camp? He asked. Karen was about to say this was the only logical answer, then stopped herself. I don't know. If Anko has been called for an emergency, there's no way we're going to reach there in time. He nodded. That's what I think, too. Maybe we should wait in the mining village. Naruto hesitated. Yeah. Maybe that's our best option. I'll locate Sakura while we wait for them, then. In the end, they waited 3 days at the inn, boredom mingling with worry. Sakura came back drenched in blood. Karen invited her up to their room. Blood's not mine. She muttered, exhausted, when she saw their faces. This guy's. She pulled out a bloody bag, from which muffled sounds were coming. Karen and Naru dash. Indra shared a look. Open it. Sakura said, dark amusement in her tired eye. Karen did and yelped when something tried to bite her finger. Ucking whore. Once I get out of here, I'm going to make you regret the day you decided to cross me. My, you're very talkative, aren't you? Sakura smiled at the disembodied, talking head. What the fuck is that? Naruto asked. That, Sakura started proudly, is the head of the local cult I managed to locate. Name's Haydn. He's the biggest piece of shit I've never had the pleasure to kill. Wait, so he's immortal? Naruto asked. Seems so. Sakura shrugged. Or at least I didn't find a way to kill him for good. And believe me, I tried. She said with a wry grin. Haydn was making a muffled sound, Sakura having shoved a bundle of dirty rags into his mouth. Karen didn't seem to know what to think of the whole situation. I really hope the room is soundproof. And this guy has a peculiar chakra. She said faintly. So now that you got this guy, the cold thing is over? Naruto asked. Well. It is over, yes. But there were plenty of wannabe immortals with him. I had to get rid of them. Naruto winced. I wouldn't worry too much, Indra-san. Bunch of child killers, all of them. You don't want to hear about the things they did. She said, disgust evident in her voice. I see. Naruto paused. Sakura-san. Will you need his head to fulfill your contract? She answered cautiously. No. Why are you asking? In this case, I have a big favor to ask. Haydn screamed something through his gag. After some deliberation, Sakura decided to remove it. Not Orochimaru. Don't give me to fucking Orochimaru. Sakura looked at him, then at Naruto. You know of Konoha's snake sage. You know about Konoha's snake sage. Haydn mimicked a high-pitched voice. Fuck yeah, I know about Konoha's snake sage. He actually looked worried. Don't let this maniac touch me. Oh, so you know he really cares about finding a way to immortality? Karen asked, now amused. Look, I'll stop with the murders even Bulletin dash. He's lying. Karen said simply to the others. I can feel his chakra flow. You fucking ugly red-haired s-dash. Sakura put the gag back on, then she threw him in the bigger bag. You convinced me. Thanks for the shower, Karen, Indra-san. I will stay in town for the 2 next days. If the snake sage doesn't come, I'll leave. Something about being called Indra by Sakura didn't sit right with him, right now. Maybe it was because he was still very worried about his meeting with the man. Or maybe it was because it was Sakura. Karen knew what he was going to do before he did. I don't know if dash. Sakura-san. She looked at him, gaze indifferent. Are you planning on going back to Konoha? It's where I was born. She saw his face deflate. Doesn't mean much to me, besides that. My parents are there, and some friends, too. That's it. The village itself. She shrugged. Naruto hesitated. Good enough for me, he said. I am. Or rather, I was. I mean, my name. It had seemed easier in his head. Sakura stared at him, curious. Karen looked at him, exasperated. Sakura sighed. Look, if it's a love confession. Karen laughed. Nah. It's not. Give my far-removed cousin some time, though. Naruto glared at her. He sighed, looking back at Sakura again. I grew up in Konoha, as Sarutobi Naruto. Sakura's face changed. Her fist smashed against the table, and her eye turned frosty. I don't know why Karen told you about him, but I really don't care for this joke. I'm leaving. Thank you again, but I don't think I'm going to wait for your master. Or give him anything, for that matter. She stood up to leave. I was there on the mission where Kurane died. She paused, glare intensifying. Did Karen tell you about this, too? Karen was just wincing at how this was going. She shook her head. Naruto continued. I was the one who summoned the gauntlet you're using in the first place. He summoned his own thunder gauntlet as added proof. Sakura said nothing. Besides, Karen was not there. Only Sasuke and Toru saw it, and I don't think they ever said a word to anyone. Sakura hesitated, unsure what to think, or feel. Do you remember how much time we spent on these dusty tomes the old man gave to me, pretending not to know I would just give them to you? Karen was not there, either. And I never told her that. Sakura's face was starting to show real doubt. Or that time at your mother's house where you told me dash. She turned bright red. Okay. Okay. Stop. Stop. Please. He smiled. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The face might be different. The hair and eye color might be wrong and his hair was getting very long, too. The strange whiskers might be new. But this smile. Karen just nodded. Then. It is really, you. Her eye quivered, and she actually sniffled. She reached to touch his face. Why do you look so different? He laughed. It's a long story. Let me tell you, then. Something else came over her. Rage. Sakura started poking his chest. Repeatedly. Hard. Ow, ow, ow. Sakura-chan, please. You, blonde motherfucker. I even cried over you. She then fell into his hug, where she proceeded to cry again. She mumbled, through tears. Ino is going to kill you, when she learns about it, so I don't really feel the need to do it myself. Even then, she sounded as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Naruto winced. So that's what happened, then. To sum it up, yes. Don't you think Toru and Sasuke should know, at least? They took it pretty hard. Really hard. He winced again. They're too loyal to the Hokage. I can't tell them anything, at least right now, otherwise I'm going to get pulled back into the Corps. Would that be so bad? Sakura asked, but she knew the answer. Would you come back as a Konoha ninja? Karen asked. I wouldn't go back to Kusa. She winced. Probably not. There were things she wanted to do that she couldn't as an enlisted leaf ninja. Just like him, then. Point taken. It's been years, too. Same for Ino, they must have gotten over it, at this point. She looked at him as though he were an idiot. Karen barked a laugh. What? How's everyone, by the way? He asked. Maybe you should go and see for yourself. I haven't been there in a while, either. Sakura said, still a bit sour. Alright. Everybody keep your cool. Karen sighed. Ah, so you're still curious about that. I mean, I literally made it in the first place, of course I'm curious. He joked. Could you have made it on your own? She asked. Well. No. Then we made it. She said dryly. Don't take all the credit. You don't even know how to use it. Naruto grumbled. It's easy enough. Mine works as a gateway, of sorts. Sakura summoned her gauntlet. Now that he looked closer, the golden parts were blue on hers. She caught him staring. I guess it's related to your affinity. Mine's water. Sakura tapped the floor, and a blue mark flashed for a second, before becoming almost entirely invisible. She then stood up and tapped the wall. A burnt orange mark appeared, and then faded as well. Sakura pushed her arm through the blue mark, and a rift opened. Naruto jumped. Sakura's arm was going through the floor, and coming out of the wall. She then put her entire head in it. He could see the back of her head on the floor, and her face inside the wall. Then she crawled out of it. And here you go. That's how it works. That's... Damn. Karen said. There's no distance limit, either. Sakura said, somewhat smugly. If I have a portal in Suna, I could go through it and come out in Kyumo. Only if you had put the portals there previously, right? Naruto asked. Yeah. I do have to put them by hand. She admitted. Is there a limit on how many you can use? Only 2 at the same time. Sakura grumbled. Do you need to use the gauntlet? I don't need to get it out fully, no. But it seems like the gauntlet is always here, waiting to be summoned, anyway. Ah. I see. Thank you, Sakura-chan. This really helps me out. He shot her a bright smile. She seemed a bit flustered. Yeah, no worries. He tried it out. Failed. Then sighed. Nah, mine doesn't work like this at all. Maybe it's the reverse. Sakura asked. Guys. Karen said. Isn't the reverse of a portal still a portal? She pouted. I'm trying to help. Guys. Karen said, louder. Orochimaru-sama and Anko are less than 20 kilometers away from here. Orochimaru made a few seals, summoning a few privacy jutsu. Then he applied the same over the muffled Haiden, once he got some clarity about what he was. It was very interesting, but he had no time for it right away. He'd need a safe place to take him apart. Anko let herself fall on the couch with a long-suffering sigh. The man spoke, tone serious. We arrived here from Ryokai Cave. We will need a new hideout. What? Why? Karen asked. Anko answered, staring blankly at the ceiling. Akatsuki attacked. It's on me, they must have linked our intrusion in the graveyard to Sensei. What? Naruto asked. Sakura stayed silent, having no idea what they were talking about. Several people died. Yugo, among those you know. Orochimaru said bluntly. Wah. Yugo is dead. He had known the gentle giant for what seemed like a while, now. To hear he was just gone, like this. Orochimaru continued, his tone clipped. Yes. Most people there at the time managed to escape. I don't know where. We will need to find them and regroup. I won't dare go back to Mukage, it's probably being watched, if loosely. Better to let the survivors see for themselves what happened and find them later. Anko, Naruto, and Karen nodded at the same time, Sakura noted with some very light amusement. These Akatsuki bastards, Karen grunted out. We should make them pay. Naruto said, voice hard. Sakura lifted an eyebrow. He was not one for vengeance, usually. Or at least, had not been, years ago. Orochimaru sighed. It's not that easy. Even if I were to tell the Hokage about it. They left no real evidence that they are linked to Rain. Konoha can't storm their village just like this. What if I just told Konoha everything? Including who I am. Same problem. Rain is allied to Mist and Stone. Suna is likely negotiating something with them too. It would likely degenerate into a full-on war. Even if we could prove our motives afterwards. I don't think it would slow the war machine down, by then. Naruto clenched his fist. What can we do, then? Orochimaru stared at him, thinking. There's only one workable way. Tell me. Build an independent army strong enough to oppose both Rain, and the rest of the world if needed. What? I will help you, of course. At this point, I know Nagato will never leave me alone. What are you suggesting? Isn't it obvious? A bigger base. A new village. Check the description for the links to the author.